Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me once again this week, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on is today we're going to kind of continue / maybe wrap up our 2023 best of stuff. Obviously, a couple weeks ago, we had Frank join us for our best of video games for 2023. Last week, we had Logan join us for our best of movies. And today, Cam and I are just going to sit down and kind of shout out everything else best of wise. Like I know Cam has his animes ranked from 2023. I've certainly done a lot of actual play stuff. We've got concerts and stuff that we went to, and just kind of a mishmash of everything that didn't really fall into those other two big buckets that we had is kind of the design of this episode. So if you like that, remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast everywhere you can, all that fun stuff. And Cam, I'll kick this off this week with one that we both did very early on in the year. And that is the Distant Worlds concert that we did. Final Fantasy, fans that we are, that came through Phoenix. It was an exciting thing to get to do kind of on this side of things, because back when I worked at Phoenix Symphony, right before the pandemic, basically, in the 3 months before everything shut down, one of the things I was excited for was that the Final Fantasy VII remake concert was going to be coming through town that October.
Yeah.
Obviously, that didn't happen because of pandemic and stuff. Eventually, they rescheduled, and it did come through a year or two ago or something like that. But this was kind of back to the normal Distant World stuff of we're going to play stuff from across the spectrum of Final Fantasy games. And in a year where Theater Rhythm Final Bar Line ended up being one of my top 10 games of the year, I got to replay the 1 through 6 pixel remasters. We had Final Fantasy 16. Obviously, you and I got super deep into Final Fantasy 14 a few years ago. You've been deep in it for a decade.
Yeah.
And
not a full decade. No,
okay.
no.
You came late too.
I'm thinking 5-6 years.
Okay. Yeah.
I joined right before Stormblood came out.
Still, so. as long term fans of the franchise, it's also always fun. This is the second time I've seen a Distant Worlds concert. This was your first one, right?
Yeah, it was.
So
I was
just
blown away.
Great getting to see all that stuff live, performed by incredibly talented musicians and stuff. I love the format of it that they've been doing recently of we're gonna kind of more or less go chronologically through these numbers. Act 1 before the intermission is going to be, Final Fantasies 1 through 6, I think is what they did. And then basically Act 2 was 7 onward. And then they had a couple big encore numbers, of course, One Winged Angel and stuff.
They had a live performance of The Answer from Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah, that's in Act 2 of this concert, they had the choir come out, so we knew we were going to get some cool choral stuff. There was what was it? One of the ones from 8, I think, that you really liked. That was the first real good use of the choir, I think.
Oh, it was the main theme of 8.
Yeah.
Which has a beautiful choir. I think it's song wise, it might be a contemporary of One Winged Angel, where you have a strong Latin chorus going on during it.
Yeah.
Squall
and Cypher are fighting off.
Yep.
Yeah. I just wanted to give a shout out, especially part of me when I started making my list was I'm going to go chronologically. And I was there are too many things happen. So I instead started to kind of group things into little buckets, but Distant Worlds was definitely one of those things early in the year that we went and did. I wanted to give that a shout out because it was a great time and had a lot of fun.
I think
I introduced you to Rumi Sushi downtown.
You did, and it was an amazing time.
We rushed to eat through it, but we did it in time and have been clamoring to get back.
Absolutely. Also, I wanted to say, if you ever think I'm not really that big into music, even if you're not as big into music as I am, or even Trevor.
Yeah, I'm not a music guy. I love video game music and I love Final Fantasy music in particular. But yeah, I don't go and I don't go watch like the classical series that Phoenix Symphony does of like we're gonna do Beethoven and Bach and Rachmaninoff.
I'm not that into it either. But I will say that even if you're not that big into video game, like I will say if you're into video game music at all, this was a great time. But it's also the atmosphere of the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
The joy and excitement of hearing this music that has like defined your adolescence and your lifetime in a very like whether it's small or big ways, being in a room full of people who have that same feeling is electric. It's
cosplayers don't show up to the Beethoven concerts.
Yeah, it's true. Not only, but like I loved how like the most cosplay we saw was the dude dressing up as an Asian, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Who sat next to me. Like the most, like that's the most cosplay. Everybody else was doing like classic riffs on like classic interpretations or riffs on like formal outfits or something from some of them. One was like straight up in like a lone cosplay from Final Fantasy VIII. I was like blown away by that. I'm like, that's like
she was right in front of us, and it was like I recognize that. I never would have been able to pull the character.
I was trying to remember the character's name, but I'm like that's so familiar. And at first I thought, do I know that person?
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh no, I just know the character that she's cosplaying, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I did see because I stepped out at intermission and went and like checked out the lobby and stuff. I did see like a couple clouds and squalls down there that were much more cosplayed out. And they were like, I mean,
for Squall, that's fine, I think, but like for Cloud, like, was it like straight up like, no sleeves?
I think so.
We were at the symphony, people. Yeah. We were at the symphony.
We were at the symphony. I mean, this was like in the days before I got an email basically being like, "Hey, here's the weapons policy for this concert," which fair. Is not a kind of email you normally get for a symphonic performance. So yeah, that was just
telling people not to bring their weapons.
Yeah, that was a fun, just all around kind of experience.
It was,
and getting to take you and introduce you to it, because the first time I saw it, I like a couple friends from like the Kind of Funny community also happened to be there, because that was 2016, 2017, something like that. But yeah, this was definitely a fun one to bring along as a new roommate bonding kind of vibe that we had early in the year. So yeah, shout out to Distant Worlds. And it was like the choral anniversary, so it was like celebrating the 35th anniversary of Final Fantasy, which was just cool. Mm-hmm. So yeah, shout out to that. So I'll throw it to you, Cam. What do you want to give a shout out to? And if you want it, like, I know we were talking before, like you've kind of gone through and like ranked your lists and stuff.
Yeah,
so
but if we're talking, I think I'm cool still just talking about like live things that we did in real life.
Sure.
So the Spider-Verse concert we went for my birthday.
That was oddly enough the next thing on my list.
Yeah, it just
like
once
I
again
got them grouped together.
Yeah, one going down to the Orpheum Theater is just always a treat. It's such an old classic theater here in Phoenix. Mm-hmm. It was an amazing time just getting to enjoy the movie with a live, like there was like big question marks for us about like going in, like, okay, a lot of the soundtrack is not like traditionally orchestral. So how are they going to do that? Mm-hmm. And like, I know I was a bigger fan of like the remixing stuff than you were with the turntable.
Yeah.
But it was an amazing birthday present. Thank you again. Mm-hmm. And just overall, it was just an amazing time to once again go out to the city, go out, like enjoy Phoenix. And then on top of that, just, we went to the Cornish pasty for dinner, then headed over to the Orpheum Theater and just got to enjoy a wonderful night. Once again, being surrounded by people who love Into the Spider-Verse, who are there to see it in that way. I think one of my favorite things about it was all the kids that were there.
Yeah.
Decked out in their Spider-Man clothes. And it was so much fun. Like how great of a present getting one to enjoy a very dedicated group of individuals who put together the idea for this concert and are touring with it, all from Brooklyn. They're based out of Brooklyn. And an incredible ensemble performance by every one member of their
it was like an all-female,
mm-hmm.
largely BIPOC like ensemble, like 20-person orchestra ensemble. That was really cool. And yeah, for me, I think it's not that I didn't like the live mixing, it's just that it was, as somebody who has like listened to that soundtrack and knows that movie as intimately as I do,
yeah,
the amount of scratches was just like, okay, I get it. Yes, you're live and I can see you doing the scratching. You don't need to do it as much. They don't do it that much in the movie. It's pretty much that was my walking away. Like
it is your favorite movie of all
immediate
time.
takeaway.
Like,
Yeah.
so it's like you having a small criticism about the live performance of your favorite movie of all time, not a big deal. But overall, like just an awesome experience, an awesome group of people, an awesome audience to be a part of with it, and just having a fantastic time. So concerts this year, both of our big symphony concerts or orchestral concerts were smash hits. So
one last thing I'll throw in this vein that you also joined me on the last 5 years.
Yeah, that was so much fun because
seeing
I'd never
that-
seen that, and that was such a big for you. That's such a big musical, and that's part of like your theater background.
Yeah,
in college.
It's a show I got introduced to in college and like immediately fell in love with. I like did a ton of like research. I had like a bootleg of like a the off-Broadway version or something, because it's a show that has a whole bunch of drama. Jason Robert Brown, like there's a lawsuit around the show where like songs had to be cut because it's a little too close to his real life, and so yeah, it's a show that, much like Rent, which I've also seen at Phoenix Theater, back in that case back when I worked there, it was fascinating to see this being the first time I've seen the show live. I've seen the movie with Anna Kendrick and Jeremy Jordan. Thank you.
Yep.
I always forget his name. But yeah, Jeremy Jordan and Anna Kendrick. And like it's a great interpretation of it. But seeing it live was just a cool experience as somebody who knows those songs, and like even though I hadn't really listened to the show in a number of years, like immediately all that starts kind of flooding back. And it's much like with Rent. Yeah, it's a show that I've like grown up and in some ways outgrown a little bit, in terms of like, I always talk about with Rent, like, oh, when I got introduced to that also in college, I was like, yeah, bohemian lifestyle. I want to be Mark. Mark's the best. And like, as the years have gone by, I'm like, all right, Benny is way too much of a villain in that show. Like, they treat him all like shit, and he's just trying to help everybody survive and get paid doing the thing they love. And everybody treats that like, oh man, fuck you, selling out's the worst. I'm like,
He pays for Angel's funeral.
it's like no, everybody, fuck you and your bohemian lifestyle. Like, you're just draining. You are literally draining resources from the city around you in that show.
And not only that, but like the most, like one of the worst things about it is like they're all, for the most part, a bunch of white people who are treating the people of color in their neighborhood.
Oh, Maureen, you want to live, your big bohemian lifestyle? Okay, well, I would take you a little more seriously if you weren't being propped up by a sugar mama. Oh, Mark, you think the bohemian lifestyle is great? Okay, well, you've got your rich Jewish parents that like you've kind of disassociated from, who are giving you a little bit of a pass. Shut up.
Yeah, it's a whole lot.
Take that privilege and walk away, please.
It's a lot of people with a lot of privilege. Now, granted, of course, it's also during like the AIDS crisis, or the kind of aftermath of the big boom of the AIDS crisis in the 80s, of people surviving with it in the 90s, kind of like in the new Gen X era of what it means to have AIDS.
Yeah.
So like it has a lot of like poignancy, I think, still. But like when it comes to one of those things, it's like, you analyze it. And for example, the last 5 years, I immediately, like, that was my first time seeing it. I had been slightly introduced to it because of, you're going to hate this, but because of clip from
TikTok?
It's of Anna
Of
Kendrick
course.
doing the opening number.
Yeah.
Which I think she nails. Like after seeing it live, I'm like, oh wow, this is like straight up, she nails that in like they're doing it like in a quote unquote realistic manner in somewhere in like Ohio or something. But it's so well done. Like she's so good at it, but also like the live performance we saw was fantastic. I immediately picked up, I'm like, oh, this guy sucks.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, I've never thought Jamie was like a hero or anything like that, but he was certainly a much more compelling and dramatic character to me when I was younger and in my college years. And like, oh, if I could sing these songs, this is a role I would love to play. And yeah, seeing it now at, when I'm 37 going on 38, I think is when we saw it, early in the year. And it was very much like, oh yeah, no, Jamie's the worst. And just top to bottom is just a piece of shit guy.
From his introduction where he's like, I'm super into this like non-Jewish girl, calling her a shiksa goddess, and just like okay, like you're not off on a right start, but maybe this is like more tongue in cheek and we'll get into it. And it's like, nope, the entire time he just treats her like garbage.
Yeah.
As soon as he gets his rise, it's like, wow. And then you told me the backstory on it about like the true story around it and everything. And I'm like, this dude had full creative license to make himself look better. And he thinks this is like the best interpretation of himself. Which says a lot about how shitty he probably actually was.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, shout out to the last 5 years, rounding out like the last of like the live performance things that I had on my list that you and I got to go and experience together. So let's throw it back to you for another item of your list.
Yeah, let's go ahead and kick things off for me. I'm just gonna start heading down things from my top streaming of the year 2023.
Sure.
We'll start off with number 10, which is Cunk On Earth. This is a Netflix show. It is a mockumentary. You've probably seen the clips on Reels of like the woman, like British woman standing out in a field and being like, "This is the
oldest place on Earth," except it's not. It's actually that way. It's 1,000 miles that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen that lady.
Yes.
I heard you playing a clip of hers about the Mona Lisa before we started recording, and I was
it's
like,
when I was going through my work. It was when I was going through my watch history of everything that I saw this year, and I was like, because when I was starting to eat, I was like, I should put a list together for this, because there's a lot of stuff that I watched streaming wise this year. Sunk on Earth was just a delight. It's just really great to see somebody like do mockumentary right.
I've seen a couple of clips over the year or so, and I just didn't know what they were from. Yeah, I was like, this seems like a comedy thing, but I don't know what the source is.
Yeah, it's just a mockumentary style, like interview style. She interviews very serious people who are trying to talk about this thing, and she's being like.
That is not how I spelled Sunk on Earth.
Yep. It's just fantastic. I just think that it's an excellent. Like we'll see another thing into it that leans a bit more into like the American side of absurdity. But there's like a level of absurdism that is applied with a nice British stoicism that I just like. It's just super endearing to me. I'm a big fan of it. So
sure, very cool. It's good to know that sometimes things aren't just a clip that some creative person made on the internet. That there is a larger thing behind the context of that thing.
And if you ever enjoy if you're like, oh, I didn't really know what that was from. It's from Sunk on Earth. Cunk on Earth. Go check it out. It's on Netflix. It's super, super good.
There you go. Very cool. So the next thing I have on my list, I won't go into too much on just because I feel like I talk about it all the time. But shout out to my Disney trip, my Disneyland trip earlier in the year. I think I did a couple over the year. But
you did a Disneyland and Disney World trip. I don't think you did multiple Disneyland trips.
Well, I did. I think I did one. I did for Disneyland birthday? For my birthday, and then I thought I did one in like June. But maybe
no, June was your Disney World trip. No, that was in
June, September. Yeah, like September, August was my Disney World trip.
You might have done it then. I might be misremembering.
And I'll just I'll lump the two together because they are largely there. So yeah, Disneyland. In particular, getting to go kind of as part of the 100 year celebration year. I was there for my birthday early in the year, which also coincided with when. Oh no, maybe it was. My birthday was when Toontown opened or reopened. So I got to be there for like the reopening day of Toontown, and that was cool and fun. Getting to go on the new Mickey and Minnie ride, Runaway Railway. That had been in Disney World for a little while, but debuted in Toontown as part of their remodel. That was fun. And in particular, I want to give a shout out to the It's Wondrous fireworks show. That was like a celebration of all of the Disney animated stuff. And there's like little snippets of every single Disney animated film scattered throughout. And in particular, one of my favorite like sequences of the song that I went back and like just re-listened to and found like a video on YouTube and just kind of like played for a while, has like a nice mashup of like 4 songs, including Go the Distance from Hercules and Out There from Hunchback, that are both just like
fantastic.
It's like it's them, it's the song from Moana about like, going out and adventure kind of thing. I forget which one that was. And then I forget which one the fourth of those numbers or that was like in that medley, but it was just a really cool like amalgamation of a lot of stuff. And just I'm as a big fan of Hercules, it's always fun getting that out there. Is I think the best number from Hunchback, so that was very fun to kind of hear those meshed together. And so shout out to that. Also shout out to Phantasmic and getting to see that a couple times before the dragon caught fire over the summer and has shut that show down for the better part of last year. And I don't think they're planning on reopening until like June or July of this year. So, and then Disney World, getting to go and attend that for the first time as a lifelong Disney kid, but as a Disney kid who grew up here in Arizona. Disneyland was like always the end of the year trip, and that was cool, and I got to do that a ton. But I did not make. I've only been to Florida like 2 or 3 times before this. So going out there for a work conference, it was basically like the work conference announced that they were going to be in Florida in a year ago in like August 2022, and I immediately pinged my boss at the time, was like, hey, if I can take dibs on going to the conference next year, please send me. And I ended up getting to go, and then stayed a few days after, so getting to go to all the parks there. I got to do pretty much everything I wanted to do. The one ride I didn't get to go on was the Ratatouille ride, just because it was my last day there, and I had my like fast pass lightning lane thing booked, and then like 15 minutes before, the ride crashed and shut down, and I just didn't have the patience to hope that it was going to come back online anytime soon. So I at the end of my exhausting 4 days, I left, and fortunately, like the hour or so after I decided to walk away from it, it was still down, so I didn't feel like I just missed it or something like that. But it would have been cool to see, but ultimately it was fine. But yeah, it was just a cool, fun, finally knocking out a Disney World trip. And definitely a thing I'm glad I did, and a thing I probably never need to do again, because Disneyland, way more compact, as we talked about on a podcast.
You went over it.
I far prefer just that.
I think like I would like to do it just once, but I will be honest with you, I will be riding like a golf cart the entire time. Like I'm not walking that shit.
Yeah.
And it's not even because like, oh, I'm out of shape, and it's like, oh, no, it's too muggy, too hot.
I mean, definitely if you're doing like a summer thing, absolutely.
Yeah. There's no chance in hell I'm walking around that park, that muggy ass swamp state, in the middle of summer, for like not happening. Mm-hmm. Like do I want to go do all the drinks at Epcot? Absolutely. That sounds like a phenomenal time. If it wasn't in Florida.
Yeah.
If it in like, do I want to sit in muggy air going to like each stand and doing that? Absolutely not.
Yeah. I did get to eat sushi from the Japan land of Epcot though. So that was
there.
Fun.
You go.
Yeah. Shout out to my Disney adventures this year. What's next on your list there, Cam?
Next on my list is my number 9 of
streaming things?
of streaming stuff, and that is What If Season 2.
Okay. While I did enjoy it, I did completely forget to put that on my list. So there we go.
There you go. Yeah. I believe we're talking about it on That D Plus show this upcoming week, so I probably won't get too into it, so it's not spoil that episode for folks, but I liked it a lot better than season 1. I think that it does a lot better at kind of telling isolated stories that are a bit more one-off, bit more what if of what I'm looking for from that kind of a show. It does have some like carryover stuff and like some more intricacies. Shout out to Captain Carter. Like we'll go into greater detail on the show this week, but just a massive shout out to, or not a massive shout out, just a solid effort. And we'll talk more about it this Thursday.
Yeah, I agree. I think well, like I wasn't a hater of the first season. I thought the way the first season started out like, oh, these are very cool kind of little like standalone things, but then there were a couple episodes where it was like that story didn't end. And it was because the end of an episode was going to really be the beginning of an episode down the line or something like that. In particular, I'm thinking like the what if Killmonger became the Black Panther or whatever. That one, it was like, that doesn't seem like that ended at all. And then, oh, it's because they pulled him into a different thing. I thought they did a better job of that this time around, where
Yes.
they still kind of do the same thing of like each of these episodes is going to in some way or other kind of build into something that happens in the finale. But yeah, I thought the standalone nature of a lot of them was more interesting. I also appreciated drastically the like once a day kind of release pattern instead of letting this be a 9-week run or something like that. It was nice to just have it like in and out in the holidays and we're good. And yeah, I think they had more like the big standout like genre episode I can think of from the first one was like the zombies one. And here they had like a Blade Runner episode and a Christmas episode and a historical Robin Hood kind of episode. And I was like, okay, like I like that they played around with the format a lot more in this one. So yeah, shout out to that. Excellent. So one of mine, because this also kind of dovetails nicely into like my block of entertainment stuff, maybe on your list somewhere, I imagine. But the next thing I have here is Invincible season 2. Wanted to give a shout out to that as a fan of the Invincible graphic novels and stuff. The first season was a lot of fun. The second season, I'm sad, was only like the 4 episodes that we've gotten so far. So I'm very much looking forward to when part 2 kind of continues on, but it's just continues to be a blast kind of seeing how faithfully and how well they adapt the story and all the different threads of the story into this live like animation form. Performances continue to be great, and yeah, I love even just like the little like a couple characters that don't get like any kind of name introduction or anything like that. They're just kind of there to be somebody that Mark stops, but like you recognize the characters and it's like, oh, I know where their story is going to go because I've read the stuff. So I love how seamlessly they've kind of, started peppering in little like, foreshadowing and Easter eggs and stuff like that. So yeah, shout out to Invincible season 2. Anything you want to add on that one?
Yeah, sure. It's my number 5 on my top streaming stuff for this year.
Cool. Jumped ahead a little bit for you. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We're not going in any particular order. I just happened to have an order because I thought that's what we were doing.
Yeah.
All good. No, I have to just say I echo everything that you had to say about it. I think also performances overall continue to be spectacular, even for like some one-off side characters. I did not really think highly of like who they cast for Cecil in season 1 before season 1 kind of aired.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of expecting it to be a bit more of an old man type voice, not so much of like the middle-aged
Walton Goggins.
Yeah, Walton Goggins. That being said, like I think that the cast is phenomenal. I think they're absolutely perfect. I love the way that the things that they've done to kind of like take on this second season and kind of like tackle, like it was a clear indication of season 1 from beginning to end, if you knew the source material, how things were going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And we got a few deviations. In this one, they really spent their time sitting in a smaller like number of issues. Granted, we only got 4 episodes, but we are really taking our time in a smaller section of the story than I was anticipating we would.
Mm-hmm.
There are other parts of it that are like larger and kind of like scope out appropriately with the comic, but there really is something about like a lot of, especially Mark's mom, what she's dealing with is very like visceral. Whether it's the like the alcoholism and the just like how like you go to a support group for widowed superheroes and you connect with somebody and then you find out that your husband murdered them, like murdered their wife,
their partner. Yeah.
Their partner. It's a brutal moment.
Yeah.
It's truly a brutal moment of this, like, she's so isolated. And they show us in how many ways she's so isolated from everything and everyone. And by the end of the episodes that we have, she really takes the time to like make strong decisions for herself and truly in spirit, if not in actuality, divorce Mark's dad. Omni-Man. I'm trying to remember his actual name, but it's Nate Grayson?
Noah?
Noah.
Is it Noah?
No.
Nolan.
There we go.
We found it.
Yep. Nolan, divorcing Nolan in spirit, if not in actuality. Like kicking his shit to the curb and like turning down the money that she was supposed to get from quote unquote his books, quote unquote his book sales.
Yeah.
Like she's doing the right things in that, like, and they're doing the right things.
They are his books. They are his book sales. Like, and that will be a big thing when they come back to part 2, because the last thing
he tells
Nolan
Mark is
tells Mark is read my books. And obviously we know what that's signifying. So
read my book. There you go. A little Simpsons Easter egg there. But yeah, no, overall, it's just a fantastic show. They've done an amazing job with it. There are a few things where I'm like, animation wise, I'm not the hottest on this because it's very clear that this is being done with like some 3D stuff but on like a 2D background. But that's just for like some general scenes that I'm like, I can.
I mean, as somebody who like my favorite animated show is probably Futurama, I have no problem with that.
Absolutely not.
I've been used to that for 20 years.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, there's no problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. I was gonna say by saying those are small scenes of like transitional scenes, so they just stand out to some of the better animated scenes, because there are some scenes in this show that are just spectacular, and it's the Viltrumite fight,
Sure,
is just out of this world great. Also out of this world.
Yeah.
But yeah, just it's so good. The basic brutality that they're able to translate from the comic and put that into motion is gorgeous in its brutality, and it's its veracity. It's so good.
Side shout out on this entry is the Adam Eve like prequel kind of one shot special that they did. I don't think you ever sat down and watched it.
I did not,
but,
no.
But yeah, it's basically like a Adam Eve centric, like here's how she came to be and here's her backstory and all that stuff.
It's from her her one shot, right?
Yeah. But it features a great kind of posthumous performance from Lance Reddick.
That's right.
Because he's the big bad of it, I think. So yeah, shout outs to that. And just as somebody who I've only read Invincible from like the compendium, so like I had glimpses of Adam Eve's like backstory, but that was done as a standalone one shot, other Image comic thing or whatever.
There's another one too that's
Dark
about
Horse,
Rixplode. Rixplode actually has one of my favorite one shots of all comic book history, because you're like, how are you gonna make me sympathetic to this just like this egregious asshole, and that one shot is successful in doing so, and you're like, shit.
Nice. So yeah, shout out to that, and maybe they'll do the same kind of thing with him, and we'll get that in a future season, or as like a helping tide you over in a future season or something like that. But yeah, shout out to all the great stuff in Invincible season 2 so far. So hit me with your next one there, Cam. Next thing on your list.
My number 8 is I Think You Should Leave.
I Think You Should Leave. Okay.
This is with Craig Robinson from the Detroiters, and it is a series of sketches. Each episode has a number of sketches in it that is just filled with absurdist humor from top to bottom. Everything goes from mundane to absurd. In like different variations of escalation as things carry on. I'm just a massive fan of that. So Craig Robinson is also like the same pace of like, not everything hits for me, but there's some things that come out of that show that are just like brilliantly funny.
That is one of those like meme to like me actually seeing it. Like the ratio is so high of like, I've seen so many of the Craig Robinson things memeified, and like obviously like you got the hot dog guy, we're trying to find out who did this kind of stuff, to the point that I kept seeing people post like 55 burgers, 55 fries, 55, like that whole thing, and I'm like, what the fuck is this from? What are people doing? And so like I Google that and find out it's from a Craig Robinson thing. I'm like, okay, sure. Yep.
That's a great sketch. That's such a great sketch.
Yeah. The one that I actually sat down and watched with you, I was just like, so he just doesn't have an end joke. I get why he got cut from Saturday Night Live now. Is basically like it is definitely his humor speaks to a very specific sensibility. And yeah,
and it is not for everyone.
The lack of a punchline in a lot of his things for me is the thing where it's like, okay, that was 3 minutes of setup but no payoff. So the setup is hilarious a lot of the time, but I'm like, I want the button, and he doesn't. He doesn't always give you it. He sometimes intentionally doesn't give it to you.
Yeah, that's kind of the point of it. Sometimes is like he forces you to sit in the awkwardness. Mm-hmm. He doesn't end it.
They are sketches that like. So I worked back in college. I worked with the Far Side Comedy Hour, which was their weekly sketch comedy troupe at ASU. Farce Side, and we occasionally would get a sketch like that where it was like we didn't really know how to end it, so we would just kind of do the like live from New York, it's Saturday night thing, and just turn it into like the opening sketch of the show and be like, all right, and welcome to the Far Side Comedy Hour, and it was just like that was kind of the catch all. All right, we don't know how to write ourselves out of this, so we're just gonna do that and move on. And a lot of his stuff feels like it would be like the cold open on Saturday Night Live, and that's how they would end it. They wouldn't have a final joke thing. They would just go into the Live from New York.
One of my favorite ones is when he's talking about a monster getting into his house through the doggy door. He reveals partway through this that it in fact was just a pig with a human mask on top of its head. And that he was at a point of being so exhausted and like under influence and everything. Like basically like he was at a perfect moment where it looked like a monster to him. Mm-hmm. And he reveals that like partway through. And then, cause at first they show you like the monster that he imagined that it was. And then he reveals, and now here's the thing. I know that it was just a pig with human mask on, but you have to understand from my perspective. And he spends the rest of the sketch doing it like you guys gotta understand. And that's kind of the joke. That's the punchline is it was a pig with a human mask on, but he introduces it earlier. And so before you're watching
it's the Knives Out way of like, we're going to tell you how the murder happened right off the bat. Yes. And the rest of it is just character stuff.
Yep. And that's the thing. It's like all this stuff where it does like linger in those moments. Is like he has done it. I feel like most of the time he's done a proper setup to be like, no, these aren't just like people in a, like a bit. This is like a real person who's going through this, and what you're watching is them living with it, and that makes it also funny to me because it's like there's just something very organically funny to me about.
I mean, I'll say the favorite clip of mine that I've seen of his stuff is the guy who's on the dating show, but just does the zip line and gets into like fights with the zip line guy, and everybody calls him out, and he's like, "You're only doing the zip line." He's like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." And you just cut to the footage of him just excitedly doing that over and over again. Like I like that bit. I like that degree of absurdity, but it's also probably like because I haven't seen that. In like the full context of an episode or something like that.
I mean, that's basically that part of the episode. Like that's the sketch. Yeah. One of my favorites is the stupid hat. Have you ever seen that one?
Maybe. I don't know.
This is like from like for season 1. It's classic. It's they two people at a financial firm embezzled money and like did insider trading, and so they're reading off like their chat history. And they bring up their coworker getting a stupid hat, and the coworker is like sitting in the audience at the trial. And it's a fedora with like a back flap to it, like a tarp flap to it on the back of the neck. Mm-hmm. And they mentioned, have you seen Mark's stupid hat? Like in the middle of their like things. And so it's just
like in the transcript.
Yeah, it's just in the transcript. And so like they're reading off of it. And it's just, he's just in the audience, and people are just like noticing, oh, that's Mark with a stupid hat. And it's like, did you see him do that thing with the dice? Like he starts bringing dice around, and it's just like, it escalates into like this horrible thing for this guy of sitting there and like, they're like, oh yeah, this transcript from this meeting. Like, did you hear what happened in this meeting? Like full side tangents in like what a real conversation would be like.
Sure. Yeah.
And then at the very end be like, oh, by the way, I transferred that money to you. Mm-hmm. And that's what they were supposed to get to.
Yeah.
But they go through this entire diatribe.
But see, like that's the punchline. That's the end of the joke. Has a closing button on it. Is, oh, here's the money, by the way. So like that one I'd get behind, sure.
Yeah.
But yeah. Shout out to I Think You Should Leave. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so, I think it's there. Oftentimes you say, "Oh, well, this thing was ahead of its time." I think You Should Leave is like at the perfect moment for its time.
Sure.
I don't know how favorable it will. It will be in the future.
This I most often see this in like Instagram reels and stuff. So I'm sure this does crazy stuff on TikTok.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's enormous but also he's become, some of his sketch stuff that is like wasn't that like phenomenal to begin with, got turned into their own memes. I'm not worried about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's from something completely not that funny, but somebody took that out of it and has like transformed it. And
Sure.
it's, so you get a lot of stuff from Craig Robinson
Sure.
that's like not
Are you
in
sure
context.
about that? You sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Or like Cornhole TV. Gosh, there's so many good ones. That one's a riff on when a conservative network was like trying to convince their audience to call their cable company to tell them not to drop the conservative network.
Mm.
And so that was like a parody of it. And it was just like out of context, like it's still super funny,
Mm-hmm.
but it's so good.
Nice. So next one on my list, which I imagine is also still somewhere in your top 10 here, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off.
That's in my anime of the year.
Is in your anime of the year? Okay, well we'll get there too eventually. Because yeah, I'm just in the show's bracket of my stuff. So yeah, shout out to Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. This was such a fun surprise, I guess, and like we watched it a little while after it had come out, so people had, for me, ruined that like there was a swerve and this wasn't just like an animated retelling of the movie.
Oh, okay.
Like, so I knew something. I didn't know what. I didn't know where they were going with it, and I didn't know details. But it was just like, it was another one of those like people were talking about enough and doing like it was happening at the same time people were talking about like, I'm not going to spoil how, Starfield does New Game Plus, but it's really cool. And I was like, okay. It, in both cases, like the fact that they were saying something about it at all tipped me enough to be like, okay, well, there's something going on there, and I can start to make my own deductions and stuff like that. But still sitting down, especially this was being another one, like I sat down and watched the first episode or two with you, and just like at the end of that first episode, and I was just being like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. No, yeah, we talked about it at the time, like when we watched it, but like I hadn't been spoiled by it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
like,
I was.
So I didn't know, like I hadn't been spoiled to that degree is what I'm saying. I just, going from somebody who like when it got announced it was all like, we're bringing back all the voice cast and here's like the clip package of just like your favorite moments, and it's them doing those things. It was like, okay, cool, and not realizing that was pretty much just all in the first episode. Yep. And everything else is just going to go in a different direction from there. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Absolutely spectacular. As somebody who was a big fan of the movie and big fan of the graphic novel series, famously the final graphic novel and the movie diverge incredibly because the movie came out before the final graphic novel did.
Yep.
That was a big point. People were like, that's surprising. And the author was like, yeah, it's going to have a different ending because I hadn't come up with the ending yet when they were making the movie. So they asked me like, hey, do you have the ending? And I told them no. And they're like, can we make one? And I said, yeah. And he helped like consult on it. And it was truly fantastic. So it's
one of those, like it's going to basically be a proto. I mean, if we ever get an end of Game of Thrones, it'll be a proto end of Game of Thrones / Song of Fire and Ice or Ice and Fire or whatever it is. Like, we're never going to get the end of those from George R.R. Martin because
he'll die before then. Yes.
Exactly. But like, I fully expect if we did, he would say like, oh, well, yeah, I didn't sign off on the ending that they did. It's like, I don't believe you. I don't believe that you didn't have some kind of knowledge or input into the ending that they did. You just saw fan feedback now and are going to say, that's not my ending. That's not what I was going to do.
For me, it's because like I
like that Brian Lee O'Malley like owned up and was like, yeah, and I'm doing a different thing.
For me, it's with George R. R. Martin, that's a bit different because he was.
We don't need to go down the George.
Yeah, we don't have
I
to
was
go
just
down.
drawing it as a parallel for.
I think that's the closest pair. Like Game of Thrones, really, what is like will be like the only parallel I can think of in literature where like that was the case.
Yeah.
Overall, I'm a big fan of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. It's like not going to spoil anything, but it does rank pretty high in my top 10 anime. I put it in anime because it's a Studio Saru animation wise, so I count it. But overall, I just think that it's a fantastic example of putting a remix or a spin on something that you, especially when you intentionally mislead the audience.
Mm-hmm.
That, hey, it's just going to be like that thing. And so I wasn't going to be too interested in it. You're like, oh, I'm like, let's watch it. And so we watched it and it was a fantastic time. But yeah, after that first episode, we were like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Was really blown away by it, ended up finishing it and just having a great time with it. I think it is it's funny. I think it's because the way it ends, it's kind of like a like what if ification of the Scott Pilgrim story.
Yep.
But things kind of end up better for everyone.
Yeah. I think Brian Lee O'Malley kind of came out and talked about the idea of like, here's like, if I could do the story over again, here's a healthier approach to it, I think. And it's very much like, I think the end of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is like, hey, here's, yes, I fully recognize from both the original and the book. Like, admittedly, he also kind of calls out the fact that like, I say multiple times in the opening that Scott Pilgrim is not a good guy because he's dating a 17-year-old. Like multiple characters call him out for that. And this is just the first time he's also calling himself out for it and like the healthy growth of that. So I think it was a very interesting examination of how to take these characters and stuff that is like established in kind of their own backstories and do that in kind of a here's the 2023 version of how to tell this as a better story and make these more fleshed out characters and people and all that stuff. It was also very fun to have that in the same, around the same time as Thirsty Suitors on the games front, which we talked about in our Game of the Year stuff a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I just think it's phenomenal. Shout out to whatever. Being so damn good. Like the Jason Lee O'Malley did such an Brian Lee O'Malley did such a phenomenal job of like rethinking the way that he told that story in such a divergent and unique way that I just think it really stands. I think that's 3 different interpretations of technically the same story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of the film, the comic, and then the anime.
And shout out to Edgar Wright coming back and also doing this and kind of him getting to take a second stab at some of these things and characters and choices and stuff. Yeah. Also,
massive shout out to everybody who was on this project still being friends, even though some of them dated.
Sure.
And were at one point engaged. Like everybody's still coming back and still having nothing but great things to say about their fellow cast members and crew members. So
yeah, I don't know the veracity of this, but I read some story out there that was basically like Edgar Wright still has all of those people basically in a group chat and basically just pinged them, was like, hey, is everybody interested in doing this, instead of going directly to agents and trying to work that out?
It's not a group chat. It is like an email group or like an online chat group basically through like Gmail.
Yeah.
So yeah, that does exist. That was in an interview. They brought that up.
It's a nice way of getting around like, hey, Chris Evans, you're the biggest person on the planet. Probably going to be hard to get to you through proper channels. You up for this, buddy?
Yeah. Just awesome.
And yeah,
stuff.
Shout out to everybody being like, yeah, I want to come back and do that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Like admittedly, I think, and like I get why, but the only people that don't come back are the twins. But in the movie, they had a very small, reduced role anyway. So
they had a small, reduced, non-speaking role in the movie.
Yeah.
So then also neither of them like to my knowledge to this day speak English. So granted their characters in the show don't speak a lot either, but they speak admittedly far more than they did in the movie. So it's pretty great.
Great. Let's dig into what would this be, your number 7?
My number 7 is Dimension 20 Burrow's End.
Dimension 20 Burrow's End. I have that later down in my list. Well, I have a big old like Dimension 20 stuff is basically mine. So yeah, let's dive into Burrow's End.
Burrow's End is, I'm not the biggest like Watership Down, Secret of Nim person.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're phenomenal films and I love the stories that they tell, but
I know of both. I've never watched and I've never read Watership Down.
Watership Down is like the more brutal one. It's definitely more violent.
I mean,
one.
Yes, I know enough about them to know what Watership Down is. But
it is the idea of taking like anthropomorphic storytelling to animals, but not like bringing them human enough that you empathize with them, but not human enough that they leave their animal traits behind, is a very interesting like decision to do storytelling in a D&D setting. There's like Redwall and other systems that are built for that, that they just kind of eschewed and just stuck to D&D, and in a really amazing way. Abria Iyengar continues to be one of the best like DMs out there, best storytellers out there, and just a phenomenal exploration of animal, like the ideas of what does it mean for a animal society to exist with human levels of human consciousness to it. What it means to like not like have these creatures that are above quote unquote animal instincts, but also like are reliant on them, and exploring kind of that duality between conscious thought and subconscious survival instinct is just a great dichotomy to break down through this, and they do an amazing job. It's a fantastic was it a full season or was it a short? I think it was a short season.
It's a side season. But it's on the longer side of their side episode. I think it's 10 episodes.
Yeah, it's 10 episodes. It's truly phenomenal. I have so much like the cast. They bring in some other folks who aren't normally on the show, who are new to the show, and they just do a phenomenal job. It is just it's true delight to see Brennan be a player, and two, it is a wonderful thing to see some fun table chemistry that we don't normally get to see.
Mm-hmm.
And just massive shouts out to Abria for her story and her storytelling, and providing like one of the best stories this year.
Yeah, I'll kind of expand this entry to kind of all of Dimension 20 stuff, since I had it later on my list anyway. Of the Dimension 20 seasons, I think I would have to go back and look at my actual plays like breakdown, but I think Burrow's End is probably the highest of my list from Dimension 20 this year. But like, the year started with kind of the tail end of Neverafter stuff, finishing up from end of last year. Then they went into the Ravening War. We got to return to Candela. That was a ton of fun with Matt Mercer kind of at the helm, and Abria and Brennan as players. So there was a ton of fun there. Then they did Dungeons.
So those are both on my list.
Those are both on your list.
Yeah, we can just talk about
we'll
them
just talk about them kind of all here. But yeah,
they're Ravening War is my number 4, and Neverafter, even though it's technically like the latter half of it, it's still my number 3.
All good. Then we had Dungeons and Drag Queens and Mentopolis. And of those, the one that like resonated with me the least, but is still like great actual play and was a ton of fun, is Dungeons and Drag Queens. And that's largely just because I'm not in the drag queen scene. I've never done like a RuPaul's Drag Race. RuPaul's Drag Race. And it's an interesting one for Dimension 20 because it's like the first time, probably the first time ever, I think, on Dimension 20 where Brennan is basically like helping guide for completely like a table of completely new players through the game. And he does a great job with it, but it's that combined with only 4 episodes. So it's like, it's the weakest of the bunch for me from the season, from the year. But even that is still like fun, and like these characters end up having like real beautiful emotional moments that like they weren't expecting to have, and I wasn't expecting them to have. And then Mentopolis, I'll just talk about, and then we can throw it back to you for Ravening War and Neverafter.
Well, to speak about Dungeons and Drag Queens.
Oh yeah.
I tuned out of it because of the slowdown in pace of gameplay. I just struggled with that. And here's the thing: there's nothing wrong with new players playing D&D.
Yeah,
I love like you were a new player with me. Granted, you had a lot more understanding of some mechanics and stuff, but I love the aspect of like teaching people D&D.
Yeah,
watching somebody teach people D&D, like watching paint dry to me. Just so like, but even then, the characters that they all brought to the table, I thought were fantastic.
Yeah, the for me it's the offset of like, yeah, I as somebody who knows enough about the game now, and because I don't remember if we'd started. Yeah, I guess we probably started by the time that was going on, but knowing enough about the game to like kind of roll my eyes a little bit at the things they don't know. But then like it's offset by the fact that there are 4 people that are doing that thing of like, we don't know, we're testing the boundaries, and so they make wild swings and go nuts with it. And Brennan yes ands everything,
because he's a great DM.
And shout out to Brennan's attire and outfit change for this one, getting all glammed out. And then Mentopolis, I didn't connect with immediately, like when it was originally airing, and so it was a thing that I finally went back and like hopped into, and it was also where I learned that the Dropout app does have like, you know, fast speed at settings and stuff like that. And I will tell you, listening to Brennan do fast-paced New York noir old-timey speak at like 1.25 or 1.5 speed is even more hilarious and also incomprehensible. So I couldn't keep it at 1.5, but like at 1.25 it was just a fun noir themed kind of vibe, playing with the like the bikes on kids on bikes, kind of a noir themed kids on bikes setup, and him just having a ton of fun with some people. Like Siobhan's in there, great. It was great seeing Mike Trapp back after Escape from Bloodkeep all those years ago.
Man, that was a long time ago. Yeah.
Daniel Radford's in there, is a lot of fun.
Hank
John,
Green's
is John, Hank Green. Yes. No, John
it's
Green.
Hank Green.
Is it Hank Green? Okay.
Yes.
One of the Green boys. He's in there as the Fix and is a ton of fun. And like one of my favorite moments of that season ends up being in the adventuring party, where like he kind of outs himself as a huge fan of it, because he's sitting there being like, I have to remember I'm playing the game and not just watching this game at times. But he was a ton of fun in there as well. So yeah, just shout out to that season as a whole. I like all of the like fun, cerebral, dumb puns that Brennan does, and it's like he sets up such a fun, like crazy little kooky world, and like my favorite, it probably has my favorite running gag of any Dimension 20 thing, in that like the opening scene is a scene between Siobhan and Mike Trapp, who's like the detective character, and she's the like femme fatale dame kind of character.
Yeah.
She comes in, she's like, I need you to look at something for me, Hunch Curio. Oh, all right, tell me your name. My name? Fake name. Stacy fake name. And he's like, can I do a snoop check to and like he passes a snoop check. But then like every other character over the course of the series, when they're asked like what their name is, use the Stacy fake name. And I won't spoil it, but the way that Brennan ultimately like incorporates that into the grander scheme of the plot that he's playing with is just beautiful, wonderful, like kismet. He took a gift from his play. It's the bola of that series, where he takes a gift that a player gives him and just like lets it grow and blossom in a beautiful way. Bola? Yes. How you say bola? Yeah. But yes, Stacy fake name, one of the best D&D characters in part because it was every D&D character in that campaign, or Kids with Bikes character, whatever. So yeah, shout out to Mentopolis. But yeah, I'll throw it back over to you to talk about Neverafter and or Ravening War.
I'll talk about Ravening War. That's my number 4.
And we will talk about it both.
Yeah, we'll talk about it both. Ravening War for me was, I'm not a big Critical Role person. It's just too much.
Sure.
As much as Brennan's like, I don't have time, I have to make a Biggetyburg. I'm at the pace of consumption of Biggetyburgs. I can't do, Toriel and like these like 100+ episode campaigns. Like and each one of them is like 4 to 6 hours. Like I just can't do that. That's a level of content that I don't have time for.
Sorry, it's Taldore. I was like, Toriel. I know what he's trying to say. What is he trying to say? Taldore, as their setting.
Yeah. I don't have that in me. I think it's a cool world. I think,
I mean, the big pain is not only is it 100 episodes, per campaign kind of thing, but they're like 4 to 5 hour episodes.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like they're like, oh, 100 episodes, cool. Are they like 30 minutes, 30 to an hour each? Nah, they're like 4 to 6 hours. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't have time for that. I don't.
I mean, it'll be on my list later, but yeah, like Critical Role, I still watched a ton of Critical Role this year, but I'm also like at this point 3 months behind probably.
Unless you have that time to give it, or you watch it live every Thursday, like it's just not happening. And I'm one of those people like it's just not happening for me. I think they're great. I think they're great performers, but getting to see Matt Mercer DM the most wild ass motherfuckers in the form of Brennan, Abria, Lou, Zach, and
Anjali Bhumani.
Yeah, Anjali Bologna. I called her Anjali Bologna. My bad. No. It was so good. It was so good to see like this like core group of characters telling an anthology story from before Crown of Candy.
Mm-hmm.
Ravening War was such a great and fun like exploration of this world being done. We have the great introduction of water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just phenomenal shit.
And then shout out, to Abria keeping it going with Earth in Burrow's End.
Yep, that's right. Oh my god.
As the payoff to Brennan starting, for those that don't know, Brennan starting his episodes of EXU Calamity Fire. So yeah, fire, water, and then the meme started making the rounds of Abria. You have the chance to do the funniest thing ever, and she just absolutely leans into it. Earth. Yeah, of course I was going to do it. So now it just becomes who's going to do air.
Yeah. It was just phenomenal getting to see them be these fun characters. Seeing this like age-old radish who goes absolutely demented and insane with Colin Provolone. Shout out Colin Provolone. Just some awesome stuff. Also, we got to see stuff from a bunch of the cultures outside of Candia,
Mm-hmm.
which was an absolute delight. Getting to see more of the Meatlands, especially for me. I've always if I was in that setting, I'd always want to be a Meatlanders character. But I want to be a bone person. This is really why, I couldn't tell you what I would want to be in Burrow's End, like a Burrow's End scenario.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why Ravening War never have to rank higher.
It seems like you'd be a stoat.
You'd have to be a stoat. Yeah, you have to be a stoat. At first I thought, maybe I could be that. Maybe I'd be like a badger or a raccoon or something. But nope, doesn't work that way. Maybe a chipmunk. Unless you watch that doesn't make any sense to you. Yeah. I'm sorry. But yeah, Ravening War, it's like I would want to be like a bone dude from the Meatlands, but like from like the desert of the Meatlands or something like that, where it's like you're like a dude made of bones. I just thought that would be cool. Like not like a skeleton, but like a bone person.
Mm-hmm. You're basically a rib.
A rib, yeah, right. Like a rib, but like not with any meat on it, just bones.
Yeah.
That was my
You're a war-torn rib.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Or like if you took like between the Meatlands and the Dairy Isles,
mm-hmm.
if you did like an in between,
be a pizza.
Not pizza, but like, you get in between because like calcium helps bones grow.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're like, imagine like basically being like a rock person or something, but instead of rocks or like an earth person, you're like a bone person instead, because that's like the ground in Meatlands.
Yeah, Ravening War is a ton of fun to go back to Candia.
Well, who would you be if you could be anybody from?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I mean, like, I like part of it I think would depend on like who I was gonna play or what kind of role I was gonna play. Because immediately when you started talking about it, I'm like, well, who would Tyson be? Tyson would probably be like a vegetarian in the clergy or something like that. Maybe a fruit person. A fruit person would be fun.
The fruit people seem to be pretty French.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't know.
Fun stuff.
Maybe cheese. I always like Monterey Jack from the first one.
He was good.
He seems like a Gouda time. So maybe something like that. Yeah, shout out to Ravening War. And yeah, like the moment, and it occasionally still pops up and like hits my feed. The beautiful moment where like Matt is talking about Despazul,
Yeah.
Despazul,
Yep.
and like it clicks for Brennan, and just Brennan leans into it and like plays immediately off him, and they share a beautiful moment between the two DMs. Is just and Abria calling it out, being like, "Yo, it's tight when DMs play with other DMs. This is fun. This is great. You guys are great." Is like that's all of us. That's I love. It's very much. I would love to see, like, obviously Abria doesn't really have like a home place that she plays. Well, I guess now with Worlds Beyond Numbers she can. But I would very much love to see a game that Matt in Exandria, that either Matt runs for Brennan and Abria, or that Abria, like, I would like to see something in Exandria, in Tal'Dorei, in one of their settings where they just kind of get to play with one another. Because we've seen it. We've seen Brennan playing in Matt's world with Abria as a player. And we've seen like Abria leading Matt's world with Matt as a player. I would just love to see more combinations of the three, because I think they're a ton of fun.
Yeah, I just think that we're in a great age of like actual play.
Yeah.
Of like you really can have like whatever you want. If you want like some more absurdist fun, you can go in like the adventuring adventure zone with the McElroys. If you want to go a bit more serious and like long, like massive epic, Tolkien-esque in scope, you have Critical Role. If you want just like fun, interesting, like divergent series of like smaller seasons of something, but always something very interesting, you have Dimension 20.
Yeah, Dimension 20 is the great anthology of like, hey, even if this doesn't click for you, wait a couple months and they'll have another thing for you that you can try.
Yeah. It really is that's why I love Dimension 20, because like not everything hits for me, but like I love what they end up doing with it and the people they bring in also. Like another thing about these long-term ones like Critical Role is like, yeah, you get some guest people to get on at some points, but you don't get like a strong rotating series of chairs, where Dimension 20, I think Dimension 20 has been one of the reasons they're so successful is because they can literally just start bringing people in for whatever, because they're only going to be doing 6 episodes.
Yep.
But it has an impact where like some guest people make some of the best characters. Like it's just fantastic. It truly, truly is. And so like, yeah, still need to watch Mentopolis because I love Hank Green. I'm a fan of the Green Brothers. Their vlog like letters to each other over the years have always been great. They're of course the people who started VidCon famously. Yeah. They're just great people. And yeah, I'm very curious to see, like, to get back into it and see what's coming forward. But following through with that, talking about Neverafter.
I will not be surprised when eventually Dimension 20 makes our cut for 2024, given that we're 2 episodes into Fantasy High junior year right now.
Oh my God. And it's the best.
Yeah.
It's the best it's ever been, which is crazy to say, because we're about to talk about Neverafter.
Yeah.
Which up to this point I would have said is like the height of their play.
For me, Burrow's End connected with me more. Oh yeah, just real quick before we dive into Neverafter, I'll give some thoughts on Burrow's End as well. The thing I really love about Burrow's End is the table dynamic of, hey, we've decided we're gonna play as a family.
That's so cool.
All 6 characters are in this family. We all have like interfamilial relationships with another. Like Brendan being the parents to Siobhan and Izzy was wild and fun, and sister to Rashawn Nadine Scott's character is a ton of fun, who's married to what's his name, Jasper William Cartwright, as a fun guest from across the pond, and then Erika Ishii as like the matriarch grandmother character. Just a blast. So much fun. The way those interpersonal dynamics play out. Everybody just absolutely making Brennan make his character horny for the big who could have potentially been a big bad of the season, but
ended up not.
Ends up not being a big bad or anything like that.
Also, shout out to Abria in that adventuring party, like gaslighting the shit out of the table to be like, no, the first stoats weren't bad, and just be like, what are you talking about? Yeah. She's like, listen, did I know they were bad? Yes, but like, no, fuck you guys, they were good.
Yeah. That's the other thing about Burrow's End that I think is what made it like probably the season of the year for me in terms of Dimension 20 stuff, is Abria, who tends to be a theater mind person, went all out with her battle sets with Rick Perry, including like the first one being that just buck wild bear. So like she went nuts there. She went she had fun and did great audio design stuff. She did the puppet stuff. Like she and this has been coming up, and I saw somebody's put together like a video essay on this. So I've not read it or not watched it or anything like that, but somebody basically put together a video essay that was basically like how Brie had changed Dimension 20 forever. And it calls back to the Misfits and Magic holiday special where she had somebody like behind the dome, like being the not Frontwinkle, because that was just one of the teachers, but the character with like the skull head thing. And it scared the shit out of them. And like she has continued to kind of push them. She obviously does a ton with the designs here, the projections and stuff. And
her husband being an award-winning composer who
and like the audio design, and Carlos Luna doing like the
tapes.
The tapes, yeah.
So good.
Just like she I'm sorry, I'm just realizing that on the video we've been saying all this on the That D Plus podcast background kind of thing. There, I switched it. Oops. Oh well. But yeah, all of that, just she continues to push what Dimension 22, and she in one of the adventuring parties I love, she called it out of like I'm going to keep asking for things until they say no. I wanted to cut out the table and we would just do the whole reactor thing as like a flipped set, but that was where they finally said no. But I love that. I love that. Again, especially with like her and Matt and Brendan all having like seasons this year, how each one influences the others has just been a ton of fun. And I love how they continue to like build on and inspire one another in all the work they're doing. So those are my Burzone thoughts. And then let's wrap up with Neverafter before we move on to other topics.
Neverafter is like the first time I think Abria's influence is really shown in the fact of the way the dome operates. It's the first time I think we get to see the interchanging background on the dome, where like the background changes on it, not just like the light changing, but also like things moving through it and everything.
Yeah, I mean, because she had done that in Court of Fey and Flowers too. It's probably one of the first times that Brennan's doing it in Neverafter, but yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I don't recall.
Yeah, Court of Fey and Flowers had like projections on the background and stuff.
Okay. I don't recall that, but it's been like a year since I watched Court of Fey and Flowers, so there you go. There you go. Yeah, it's the first time we see Brennan use it, and I think it's used to fantastic effect. I think that it's done incredibly well. But the thing that drives me for this is the approach to the meta narrative for me with Neverafter was something I was not initially sold on, but bought into later. And it's the idea, like, because for me, and when you think about death in D&D, death can oftentimes feel like such a nothing thing. Revivify, resurrection spells, scrolls of true resurrection, all these sorts of things that kind of exist within the fantasy world of D&D. And to see death treated as such a transient thing, like you just go to the next phase of your character, was something I was initially sold on, but definitely was bought in on later, especially as you got to see kind of the evolution of these characters. I think Neverafter is the first time where we see people intentionally choose not quote unquote happy endings for their characters.
Sure.
The way that they approach, especially with like Gerard and other characters, where they kind of like lean into the worst aspects of themselves in order to make deals to go forward in the story. And I love the aspect of this grimmer, darker world where everything has a price. Whether it's like, hey, like it's something as wildly crazy as what happens to Thumbelina with between her and
Rosamund.
Rosamund.
What? Rosamund. Yeah.
Yeah. Rosamund.
Sleeping Beauty.
Or to the point of like Gerard being like, I accept I am the frog. Now he's this incredibly powerful character by the end in the final battle, but that is the cost of humanity. And I love the idea because I think it harkens back to games like World of Darkness, which is like Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse. Shoot, I'm trying to remember what the Magic one is because that's actually my preferred version of it. But anyway, the idea that humanity is like a cost, like there's an economy attached to humanity. And I love the idea and aspect that kind of got taken for this and really put into it, which is things getting twisted and going wrong, and like really leaving it up to players. Like the players could have taken it in a direction where they're like, no, we want to set things back right the way they were. And Brandon would have gone along with it. But because the players at this table were, of course, the classic table setup of, Ali and Siobhan and Lou.
The Intrepid Heroes.
Yeah, the Intrepid Heroes. Coming back and doing this, I think, was just such a phenomenal experience of seeing them explore character narratives that weren't quote unquote like good for the and not like also realistic. It was just done because in the moment that felt like that was the right choice to make. Part of it was like throughout this game, they had a little like 12-year-old girl be their tank. Full grown adults hid behind a little girl. And it's like, that's a dark thing to really think about. Like you force a child to be your shield. And you kind of have like the exploration of it, or like, it's like Pinocchio learning like, hey, I lied to save my dad's life.
Yeah, and I was punished for that.
And I was punished for that. Like,
yeah,
like how is this
fuck
good?
Your rules.
That's how we feel about it. But like Lou is such a great character actor, and like really exploring Pinocchio's. He's definitely plays with Pinocchio's like more mischievous side a lot, which I love. But there really is that aspect of exploring this character and like what's wrong and right with this world, and in the world of fairy tales. Is the dichotomy between strong good and strong evil that good for everybody? Just awesome stuff. Also playing with like meta narratives of like storytelling with Boots, like Puss in Boots, who is actually the cat in like the overall greater narrative of the meta narrative. Sorry, is an overall greater character in the meta narrative of storytelling in general, as a trickster character and a trickster archetype. Exploring that aspect of it a little bit. Getting to explore the idea of the wolf as death, the idea of course, like Little Red Riding Hood, the Little Red her Little Red Hood being a symbol of maturity and getting older, and like playing into a lot of these like more, like a lot of trope work was done in that season. And as somebody who's a big fan of narrative tropes, as far as like learning about them and studying them, I love the hell out of it. And when you come down to it and you look at like these characters and kind of their overall stories, Snow White being, a pseudo lich, like a necromancer, is awesome. Cinderella in her glass armor, so sick as hell. It is one of my favorite storytellings of like quote unquote storybook characters, being done in a way that I think is just absolutely phenomenal. And so I love the twists and the turns that get taken from it. Massive amounts of inspiration coming from, of course, things like Fables and like all sorts of stuff that you could just see that they pulled from, and it was fantastic.
Especially given that they probably filmed this, in the months after it had a lot. Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh yeah, right after that,
multiverse and stuff.
Yeah, the idea of like Brennan's take on multiverse and the idea of storytelling and storybook storytelling is so good, especially when they get to like the idea of what is the authors. What is this idea of like consciousness, subconsciousness, and like storytelling as a whole? Like you get into some like fucking Joseph Campbell shit of like, a hero with 1,000 faces. And like Siobhan even mentions that, I think, in an adventuring party for Neverafter.
Yeah. I mean, having like the side, the Mother Goose has her book, but then there's Scheherazade out there and there's Aesop and.
Well, his book.
Yeah.
This one.
Sorry. Yes. Mother Goose. Yes. Mother Goose has his book. Yes. Lots of fun in terms of the variety of these stories, and really playing with the like the mythos of these myths / fables / fairy tales / characters / archetypes and tropes and stuff like that. Ton of fun. And I remember like the wild, like, what are they gonna do following the like complete party kill, total party kill in the first battle, being like, and like me very much kind of walking away from that being like, Brennan designed that for all of them to die.
Yeah.
And he kind of argues in the adventuring party, no, I didn't, you could have survived. You just rolled very badly on your stealth check. So everybody had the jump on you. You didn't get that first round that you needed to maybe do well. But it was like, no, the amount of damage that the fairy godmother was doing to everybody, there was no way they were going to be able to take her down, kind of thing.
Well, they took her down. The problem was afterwards, right?
Yeah, they took her down as like a death throw, basically.
And I think that was kind of the bigger point. Is like, I think he imagined some people would die. I don't think he imagined a TPK would happen.
Yeah, but it was still very like, it was the first time in Dimension 20 where like the episode ended and there wasn't a trailer for what was going to happen next week. So it was very much, and the fact that the next week's episode is individual scenes of here's how you transition to your next story, the next version of your story, and all that stuff, just being like, just you're too good at this, and you get the saddest like nat 20 ever.
Yeah, I was gonna call it out. The saddest nat 20 anybody's ever gotten.
Yeah.
Fantastic shit. Such fantastic shit.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some sort of like recency bias going on. Neverafter is probably like in the middle range of my Dimension 20s.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is also just like I'm not the huge horror guy.
That's true. This was no horror season.
It was very weird, and yet this was the kind of horror I could do. I will say though, Neverafter, the editors just going completely buck wild in like editing in, like the schism fragments of Brennan doing a hand gesture from like 5 different episodes and just taking that moment and like intercutting them all and doing all the glitches and stuff like that. It was the thing, it was pulling something from Into the Spider-Verse into Dimension 20 and just being like, how that, like, good for you guys. The amount of props and laudits I have for them is just crazy.
The Dimension 20 subreddit on like after Starstruck, I said shout out to the after post, like the post team on this, between the audio effects and like the music choices and everything they chose to do for that. It was just out of this world phenomenal. Neverafter took that to the next level. Mm-hmm. And whether it was the fucking creepy as hell, creepiest fucking intro that they had.
Yeah.
There's so much about it that I just loved and was so attached to with the and I think one of the reasons I rate it so highly is because I do love that level of like analysis and storytelling.
Yeah.
And that kind of like media analysis that goes into a story like Neverafter versus something like Burrow's End. There's not as deep of a meta narrative or like conversation about like tropes and other things that go as deep as they would for something that's built for it, rather than something that's very much particularly tailored towards, hey, we're going to tell a family story of stoats and magic and science and sci-fi stuff. I think it's one of those things that you mentioned, Dimension 20. If you don't vibe with something, wait a couple months, they have something new.
Yeah.
I just feel like they just really just don't miss ever.
Yeah.
And that's crazy to say.
Yeah, I think there's one season in there, I think 20 at this point or something like that, I think Burrow's End was the 20th season. So Fantasy High now being junior being 21. I think there's one season I've not watched, and that was like Shriek Week, and that's largely just because, again, that's not my particular vibe.
Shriek Week was less of horror focused and more of just like, hey, let's get this guest rotation in there. Mm-hmm. I feel like I just didn't vibe with the kind of like games that were being played for Shriek Week. So,
that's like the one thing I haven't watched, but everything else has been some variation of like, this is fucking great. Yeah. So shout out to that. Real quick, kind of staying in the TTRPG space. We talked about it a little bit. I'll shout out. I'll throw my shout out for Critical Role here. This kind of being largely Bell's Hell's campaign 3 centric, but like I said, I'm like, I think the last episode I watched is like 72, 73, something like that. They're fighting their way out to a ghost pirate ship. And I just haven't, I fell off and haven't been able to like pick it back up and hop back in. But also, but like so much great stuff happened this last year. They split the party and brought in a whole bunch of guests, including like Emily Axford to one of the tables, which was a ton of fun. Like Bria's in there. And so just a ton of great kind of guest stuff and opportunities they had as they continue this, crazy epic story. They had some just wild moments this season where characters from like all three campaigns converged, and like obviously Matt's kind of driving two of those three sets of characters, but like the players at the table getting to see like their characters interact with from past campaigns and stuff was a ton of fun. So shout out to Bell's Hells. And then also they did a lot of cool like video game tie-in one-shots this year. The only one I really watched was the Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom one-shot, but that was a ton of fun. They have a great time with it, so shout out to that. But they also did like Mortal Kombat one. They did a Persona 5 Tactica one that Liam kind of drove. So yeah, shout outs to like the partnerships that they get to do and have fun. They did Sam did a NordVPN one based on like the
sponsorship,
the ongoing,
right?
NordVPN sponsorships that he has. They did a dedicated NordVPN one shot, which is just like, okay, cool. And then also shout out to all their Candela Obscura stuff. I haven't watched a ton of it myself, but I think it's cool that they're stepping and they are kind of using that as an opportunity to bring other people to the table that aren't kind of their core crew and have like regular games that they can kind of be playing that does bring in other voices and other perspectives and stuff like that. So yeah, shout out to the Critical Role crew and all the good stuff that they're doing there. So I'll throw it back over to you, Cam. Hit me with your next streaming pick.
Gosh, yeah, let's go back in further up in order. Loki season 2 is my number 6.
Excellent. That was like one of the next things on the list, so I'll just pop it up here. Let's talk. So this was what, number 6 on your list?
Number 6 on my list, yes.
Okay, cool.
So right above Invincible season 2, right below Dimension 20 Burrow's End.
Gotcha.
If you really want to hear like my full thoughts, I won't spend too much time on it because we did a full D+ show about it.
Mm-hmm.
Go watch that. We go into a lot of it. I will say that there is a big like question mark at this point about Kang variants with the with the post because long after we finished that episode of that D+ show, Jonathan Majors is out at Marvel, and so what happens next with the overall thing, we did get to see a bit of the world tree, Loki's world tree, and What If. We did get to see like there seems to be some hints that there is still tied to a greater thing. What ends up happening to it, who knows? Who's to say? But I have to say that out of that, like my full thoughts are located in that D+ episode. I don't want to spend too much time here talking about it, other than to say I really like the way that it ended. I like where we ended up getting to, even if sometimes it felt like we were taking a while to get there or a roundabout way of getting there. I think that it all worked in the end. I'm a lot hotter on it than I think a lot of other folks are, but overall I had a great time with it. And I think it's such a great end for where Loki's character ends up and is very good.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement that this was the best thing from Marvel this year. Yes. Marvel proper, I guess, because you could say Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. But yeah, Marvel proper. Loki season 2 was the best MCU thing we got this year. Again, like Cameron said, we have extended thoughts about this in that D+ show on Loki season 2. But I had a ton of fun with this. And I think it was a great, beautiful send-off, assuming it will be a send-off, but they could always bring him back again for Tom Hiddleston's decade plus with Loki. And I love that he's gotten to play like the character growth of Loki in so many different ways at this point.
Yes.
So this was a ton of fun. I did have my gripes with it, as we talked about on the episode. Like I missed the Loki-Sylvie dynamic that they really explored kind of in the back half of the first season. And that kind of gets largely displaced and set aside in season 2 in favor of the timey-wiminess that they're playing with and especially like Loki Mobius stuff. But that said, like the last 2 episodes just in and of itself were a ton of fun. And the ideas and stuff they play around with. The addition of Ki Hoi Kwan as OB was just beautiful, pitch perfect stuff. And so yeah, shout out to Loki season 2, absolutely. The next one here, and I think this not the last thing I have on my shows, but one of the last things that I imagine is probably still somewhere up on your list is The Last of Us. That show. That was
I forgot to put it on my list.
You forgot to put Last of Us on your streaming list. Okay. Well, we'll talk about it here, and you can figure out where you would want to slot it in. Yeah, Last of Us.
Cunk On Earth is getting booted.
Sorry, Cunk On Earth. Yeah, Last of Us getting the show. Just like so good. If one of the best, if not the best, video game adaptation thing ever. And like it in ways is like not a surprise, because obviously the story of the first Last of Us game is one of the most lauded stories in video game history. So if they're going to keep a largely faithful adaptation, which this very much is a largely faithful adaptation, you're taking greatness and making more greatness. But especially with like the Frank and Bill scene, which won Nick Offerman an Emmy, so shout out to that, and was beautiful and probably one of the best episodes of anything this year, not named Succession. And as somebody who doesn't watch Succession, was the best episode of anything this year. It was just such a joy. Pedro Pascal is just an absolute blast as Joel. Bella Ramsey just immediately sets a great tone to be Ellie, and is also Ellie, just like Ashley Johnson is Ellie. Getting to see Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson kind of pop up in little cameos, and even Laura Bailey, was a lot of fun. And yeah, I loved the way they took the chapter structure of the game and kind of broke it out in a very similar format for the episodes. And they, like, even from the jump, kind of the first thing we see being this like 1970s thing about like, here's how bad a pandemic could be if fungi come in and like cordyceps come and fuck us over.
Fungi don't have a vaccine. You can't vaccinate against them. Exactly. You can't cure them. They are a living thing inside of you.
Using that to set the tone for this show, while we are still arguably in a pandemic of that has been the last 4 years of our lives, that suddenly everybody knows exactly how fucked up this would be then, was great. The other little flashback we get at some point to kind of like Ground Zero, was like so wonderful and inspired. And I loved everything new that they introduced into the show, maybe like one exception being like the fungus kissing what's her name
that was creepy as hell. That was creepy as fuck. We didn't need that.
That was a weird choice that they made.
We didn't need it. Shouldn't have happened.
But yeah, like
don't need that.
Like I remember watching one of the episodes with you, and like me popping when they make the pun, like when she pulls out the pun joke, and then like a couple minutes later you popping when she pulls out like the porno magazine. Just being like, this is a perfect distillation of Cam's taste versus my taste, but why like both of them work so wonderfully in this show.
It's a beefcake magazine.
Yes.
And that's what makes that scene great, is because there's so many things that...
How does he even walk around with that thing?
It's so good.
So, I mean, yeah, great one-to-one.
Great. So good. It's just, there's also, because that's also like one of your big clues that Bill's gay in the game. Mm-hmm. Bill doesn't have a beautiful episode where he connects with another survivor and they have the most gorgeous romance that's ever been put on television.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in the game. Instead, it's a tutorial section to learn about traps.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you do get the relationship between him and Frank.
Yeah.
Referred to, and you can find stuff and read and get, okay, there was a deeper connection there between those two.
You can't, but it's not as beautiful.
Yeah.
Nearly as beautiful. I don't have a sticker that my boss gave me that says Bill and Frank, and it's like also strawberries. So like, yeah. Anyway, but to my point, I will say is that wonderful show. It's my number 2.
I also want to shout out them casting a deaf actor as Sam in this.
Yes.
To make that change for that character,
which is brilliant.
And yeah, just that the Sam and Henry relationship already going in for anybody who played the game is like, oh, this is going to suck. This is going to be so traumatic and painful. And then like, yep, that's they just add a whole extra layer to it by the extra time that we get between Sam and Ellie, and like the friendship that starts to blossom there, and the beautifulness of that. And then, yeah, just the fact that he is so dependent on Henry because of that extra layer of being deaf in this, world.
It's also when she says, "My blood's medicine."
Yeah.
And like that scene alone.
Yeah.
Fucking kills me inside
Yeah.
so much, because it's like we play the game, we know what happens. They had decided to add an extra punch to it where Ellie's trying to save Sam as well.
Mm-hmm.
And she's hiding that he got bit, and it is such a fucking tour de force. That show is such a tour de force. I can't believe I forgot it. I blame it on the fact that the problem was I was going through like the platforms that I watched stuff on.
It was like the beginning of the year.
It was the beginning of the year, but also we watched it. We watched it
on my HBO
on your
account.
HBO account. So I don't have that on the front TV, so I wasn't going through HBO Max.
There you go.
So like, I missed that. That sucks that I forgot about it because I didn't see it through all the stuff I was watching. The Last of Us is just phenomenal.
Storm Reed, shout out to Storm Reed, also winning an Emmy for her role as Riley in a beautiful adaptation of the DLC. The Riley and Ellie episode. Again, just like every episode of that is like everything ends with a gut punch, and like there are no happy endings in this world right now. Oh, poop.
Yeah.
The happy ending that Bill and Frank get is like the bright spot of the season.
I will say one of my favorite things that they added was the scene in Malaysia where the like ground zero stuff. The ground zero stuff. Yeah, no. I wanted to give a special reference to when they sit down, the lady who's in charge of viral diseases and everything, and they say, "So what do you recommend?" She goes, "Bomb."
Yeah.
She goes, "You're gonna have to carpet bomb the entire city. You're gonna have to destroy everything, like eviscerate everybody."
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "It's too late. Like, bomb. You have to bomb." She goes, "I'm going to go home and be with my family." And it's like, that is for people who are like, "Oh, I mean, would have been that bad?" It's like, yes, it would have been that bad. And like, I love also the tie-in where it's like, yeah, it was literally in the wheat.
Yeah. That's like, I shout out to the eagle-eyed people that like picked that up from the first episode of like, hey, they didn't do the pancakes because he didn't have eggs or whatever, and they didn't do the cake, and so this is how they avoided it. Just being like, and people being like,
oh, that was a theory that people had from the first game, was that it got through people. It got because everybody's like, how could it have spread everywhere? And somebody's like, it could have gotten grain. Like there's a grain.
Oh, okay.
Like there was a grain thing, and there was like Easter egg about grain in like wheat and grain in the first game.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, it was something that I read online. I might be like misremembering it, but I remember people being like, yeah, it turns out that wild fan theory about the cordyceps stuff getting to everybody through like, wheat and bread and stuff was the right one. So
I remember that. I only remember that rising to prominence after the first episode, where people started like pitching that as like their theories, and then we get confirmation of it a couple episodes later or something. Shout out to Last of Us.
So good.
Let's move back over to your list. What do you got next for me, Cam?
So let's see. We talked about Invincible Season 2. We talked about D20 Revenue Award, D20 Neverafter. My number 3 is Star Wars Visions Season 2.
Oh, yeah. I completely forgot about that one. Good call.
Yep. Star Wars Visions Season 2 was phenomenal. Instead of focusing on anime studios in Japan, they went worldwide. We got some incredible and fantastic interpretations of the Star Wars universe from several different cultures, going through Europe, Africa, Asia, and like everywhere. We got such a worldwide Star Wars Visions Season 2 really let us take a broader scope about what animation is, what it can be, and what Star Wars can be in that medium and platform. and they do such an amazing job with it. It is phenomenal from top to bottom. I love every episode. Some episodes you love more than others, but I really don't think that there was like a like even the like least interesting episodes still ended up being very good, like just being spectacular. So overall, it's just a massive shout out to me. Anthology series telling a lot of different stories from a lot of different like perspectives and cultures, and just letting us experience Star Wars in different ways, which is something that, you know, we just don't get enough of.
Yeah, there are rumors of an impending Star Wars What If series. And for me, like Visions has largely been that, like, you know, these have been like, none of these are canon kind of things. And they just kind of get to play with it. And so I love that kind of adventure though. I love that the freedom that takes, in terms of like, hey, let's go ahead and take, you know, this niche idea that we think about and we want to tell and use it to tell a story, or the ways that we can kind of take the Force and say, here's our interpretation of the Force, or here's our interpretation of, you know, the struggle between the light and the dark and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. Great shout, that had kind of skipped my mind when I was pulling my list together.
So. It's okay. It happened to both of us this time.
Yep, indeed. All right. The next one I have, which I imagine may still be on your list, is then the Doctor Who, which again, we just did a big old That D Plus Show episode on it, last week. So we won't, you know, I don't need to dive too much into Doctor Who, but getting like fun, just getting back into Doctor Who, with the 60th anniversary specials, as well as the introduction to Ncuti Gatwa as the new Doctor, the revisiting of David Tennant as a new Doctor as well, but you know, obviously his history as the Doctor. Getting Donna back was a ton of fun. And also I will shout out, kind of in conjunction with this entry for me, is Who Culture, which I mentioned in our That D Plus Show episode, but it's basically the what culture that, you know, they do top 10s and they do kind of breakdowns of like, here's what's great and here's what's not about various pop culture things. Obviously I got introduced to what culture through What Culture Wrestling. But they have various spin-offs like Trek Culture, and Who Culture. And so, yeah, as I've fallen back into the rabbit hole of Doctor Who, I've been falling into a ton of Who Culture videos and stuff like that. As well as like, you know, their breakdowns of each of the, you know, 60th anniversary specials and stuff like that. So shout outs to all of that. Anything to add there, Cam?
No, I mean, watch That D Plus Show episode if
Yep.
you want to know what I have to think about it.
Cool. All right, and hit me with your next item.
All right, my next item is last item on my streaming list, which is One Piece. One Piece, the live action show.
Okay, I was gonna say, wait, One Piece, how does that not fall in the anime camp? Oh, the live action One Piece.
Yep.
Got it.
It was a phenomenal adaptation, the best anime adaptation we've ever gotten. I think that it is spectacular. I've talked about it on multiple That Nerdy Site shows. It just truly was a phenomenal experience getting to see this world brought into live action, with the passion and fervor that the people at every level of this project had, whether it was the actors, the director, showrunner, script writers, everything, everybody down to Oda himself, being so involved with this project and really making sure they get it right. I can't wait for season 2. So
Great. So have we covered all of your streaming stuff then?
all my streaming stuff, yeah.
Okay, well, that excellently, like, conveniently times out with the end of my TV stuff ish. So the next thing on my list, as a shout out, is the Hbomberguy's video on plagiarism, being the first thing from Hbomberguy that I've ever watched that wasn't just him breaking through a wall and yelling at Ben Shapiro. But I have since gone through and watched a number of his other videos, including the one on climate change, where that originated from.
Yep.
So yeah, this, like,
Did you watch his Roblox one?
oh yeah, that was the second one I watched. I basically started like working backwards. I've watched his one on Ruby, even though I've only ever watched the first season of Ruby. Basically about like, here's why Ruby is a disappointment. And yeah, so yeah, his video on plagiarism, I started seeing people like post about it and seeing like a 4-hour YouTube video. Oh my God. And then like I turned it on and watched it all that night kind of thing. It hooks me in immediately because like one of the first subjects he kind of examines is Philip Mewson, which obviously I know and knew very well because of all the IGN stuff surrounding it. And then just kind of he goes into a whole bunch of characters and people on YouTube I've never seen or anything like that. And just like it just a fascinating examination. And then like 2 hours into the video, he gets to like, okay, and here's the real meat of it, and fuck this guy. And it's just two more hours of fuck this guy, and here's just what a shit dirtbag he is and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, yeah, another person I've ever heard of, but yeah, absolutely fuck this guy. And shout out to the amount of research that goes into that, and the amount of like as somebody who doesn't regularly watch video essays, like I get why, if this is the kind of video essay you watch, why you get into video essays.
Yes.
And it's sad that like so many of the like first subjects he kind of talks about are the people doing shitty video essays, churning it out, just copying from Wikipedia, copying other stuff online, and still getting like the views and the clicks for those video essays.
Also shout out to our friend Mick.
Yep. Who was caught up in the James Somerton copy plagiarism bullshit. Because
he stole his shit from Uppercut about Hogwarts Legacy and Jewish stereotypes. Yeah.
Yep.
Somerton fucking sucks.
Apparently. Yep. So yeah, wanted just to give a quick shout out to that. It is one of the best things I saw on YouTube last year, so I wanted to give it kind of its own little shout out. And yeah, it again, as somebody who like the biggest stuff, and I'll give kind of an ancillary shout out here to like Defunctland, because they're probably the deepest I've gone down that rabbit hole of like somebody who's passionately making documentaries or examinations of a specific topic. Like those are the ones I've seen, and like, you know, I sat through a 3-hour video on the history of like Disney and queuing, and this is very much absolutely in that vein, so it very much spoke to me in that regard. But I also love how like it is an essay in the very classic sense of like, I'm going to lay out my argument piece by piece, case by case, and give you my thesis and give you kind of all of the arguments that I'm pulling together for this to tell this story. And then, so yeah, going back through a lot of his other things, the Roblox one, I've watched like why Fallout New Vegas is amazing. Some of his older, like, the climate change one, just so much good stuff out there that I'm like, okay, yeah, this guy knows his shit. Shout out to Hbomberguy, and the amazing, sadly, like only once a year kind of videos he does, but shout out to them nonetheless.
Yeah, I think for me, he really is there's a scale of YouTube video essays. Hbomberguy is 100% within like the doctoral thesis end of things.
Yeah.
Like it's rare a video of his comes in from like at under an hour. But I mean, it's also like why people support
these days. I mean, that's like the if you go back a few years, they were 45 minutes, 50 minutes, something like that.
But back in that day and age, that was still super fucking long for YouTube.
Absolutely,
like,
exactly.
That's kind of like the big thing about him is that he's always been part of this long form content, and he really only has been able to do it because of things like Patreon. Like he was an early adopter of Patreon. He is still like one of my favorite creators on the platform because he does that level of research you expect from somebody who is in academia. That's kind of his whole shtick is he's like, if you want somebody who you can be like, hey, I want to know for a fact this stuff was vetted and checked out and has like citations and proper sourcing, you can lean on Hbomberguy. And he really does take that with like a weight of responsibility.
Yeah. His thing on vaccines as well.
Phenomenal.
Was another one I watched.
Yeah, he is so brilliant and so good, and he's so great. Like, shout out to my Game of the Year list where you gave me that tip to go full Hbomberguy in that section.
Yeah.
because he's just like, he is also just a very funny person, also very progressive, was way ahead of everybody else on the YouTube platform for trans rights. Famously did a very impactful stream of Donkey Kong 64 that at one point had AOC on, like, as a, like, somebody talking while he was playing, talking about trans rights, and about like kind of like, you know, helping out with like the Mermaid Foundation and other things like that, like helping out these folks who society was really at that time still dogpiling on. It was still like considered publicly okay to be like, trans people weird me out or are icky. Like, that's something that was still pretty typical at that point. And of course we're talking about like 5-6 years ago. So like, it wasn't okay then, but people were not getting, you know, not really getting canceled, so to speak, for it. But he really has been at the forefront of a lot of progressive action. He's about as progressive in his actions and his activity as his hairline is regressive. Sure. I'm only saying that because I think he might find that funny.
I feel like that's probably a joke you're unknowingly plagiarizing.
Yeah, I'm unknowingly plagiarizing Hbomberguy a joke about his own hairline.
Yeah.
Shout out to him just being awesome though. Like totally willing just to also, like, if it's in good humor and good faith, he's totally willing to play a bit and like be funny and great. But also is one of the first people to like shut you down if he thinks that you're being an ass, or you're being cruel. Just incredible, empathetic person and human being, deserves all the love, and appreciate the deepest of dives this motherfucker has been going on.
Yeah, just the watching this one first and then going and watching the Roblox one, it's fascinating because you see the seeds planted in the Roblox one for what would become the plagiarism one. But he also, I read, I don't know if it was like with Vulture or somebody, he did like an interview that basically talked about how when he was doing the Roblox one, it was supposed to be a goof thing, and then it spiraled into this Tommy Tallarico nonsense. And this one, he landed on the James Somerton kind of like discovery and like what a shitbag that guy was, and kind of built the case from there. And again, that speaks to like the way he structures that video. That is his thesis, is James Somerton sucks and plagiarism is bad. And so let's kind of do all of this legwork to explain to you why all these things that James Somerton does sucks. And I'll give you very specific segments that each of these other people do or did. And so to introduce those elements to you. And then when I show you the person that's doing all of them, you will understand why this sucks so badly. It is just, again, like, I think you're right on the money there. It's like doctoral thesis level, amazing research and criticism. So yeah, shout out to that.
Yeah. And then there's some people who do like 5-minute long video essays, and that's it. And that's great. And they're not trying to do anything more than that. And they'll put out like 60 of them in a year. It's really about like how deep you want to go. And it's important. It's super important that we have a wide scale of these things, so that people can come in at the level that they're at to then get further into one way or the other. Because here's the thing. I watched that Hbomber video. You watched it all in one sitting. I watched it over the course of like, what, 5 days?
Yeah. I mean, at least, yeah.
Yeah. Like, just, it took me that long to get through it because I just did not want to spend that much time on a single video.
Mm-hmm. I saw a criticism out there being like, this is not an essay. This needs to be edited down. I'm like, fucking idiot. He gave you chapter breakdowns. Like, it's an essay in that, like, okay, fine. If you really want to, you know, stretch it, it's a book. Like, you could still treat it like that. It is that, you know, form of work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Deal with it. Grow up.
Yeah. People just don't, like, people can't comprehend in an era where people are like trying to ditch long form content because the algorithm isn't playing towards it. Hbomberguy is smashing that as like a thing. It was like, if your content's really worth it, and more importantly, if you have a substantial fan base that understands, one, your work takes a really long time to get out, and two, it is a matter of like faith. Like, you can trust, hey, this 2-hour plus long video is going to be worth it because you've watched an hour and a half of this stuff and it was still worth it. And it is kind of that buy-in. You kind of did a blind buy-in on Hbomberguy.
Yep.
And ended up paying off dividends. But for people like me who, like, you know, like his Why New Vegas is Good video is one of my favorites of all time. Like, it's such a great moment to see. Once again, him, anytime he puts out a video, everybody freaks out about it because it is great.
It's
one
always
of those,
great. I still see it regularly in my recommendations of like why Fallout 3 is bad, and I have not sat down to watch that one because I feel like that's going to hurt me in a few places. But he makes a lot of the arguments of why Fallout 3 is bad in the New Vegas thing, and I'm like,
yeah,
I don't disagree with anything he's saying, and especially in light of Starfield, I'm probably going to agree with him way more on the Fallout 3 stuff.
Yeah, probably.
So, yeah.
I anticipate a future video of why Starfield is bad.
Oh yeah. So yeah, shout out to.
It might just be 5 seconds long of like, I already told you why Bethesda's bad. Like,
there you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, shout out to Hbomberguy. Anything to add before we move on to your next?
No, I think I've added everything.
Great. And what's your next item here?
So I'm moving into my top 10 anime of the year. Sure. First, real quick, honorary mention is Away Paladin. Away Paladin is in season 2. Season 1 was better than season 2. Like season 2, unfortunately, suffers from a lot of what I would just properly consider like bad direction, I'm not sure if it's a lack of budget or if it's just the overall direction. So Away Paladin is adapted from a light novel series. It has made its way into a comic or manga, and it's one of my favorite stories recently in the last probably like 5 or 10 years. It's part of an isekai, which is, somebody born into another world or transported to another world. In this case, it's somebody who is born into another world after dying in our world. But it takes a very interesting point where it's not like the person has a full consciousness. They have an understanding that they were born in another world and that they're being reincarnated, but it's not like they have full details. They know they have impressions about their life, but it's not like, oh, I'm a full grown adult being transported in this world and I have like the knowledge of like modern society so I can like be super powerful or like have a way of like impacting the world that makes me basically the like king or god of it, like a lot of the shows in this genre do. And instead of taking it like, oh, and he's reborn, where is he reborn as? He's reborn actually as a human sacrifice, that it was supposed to be sacrificed to release essentially the most evil being that's ever been evil and is unkillable, so they had to seal it away. But he's adopted by 3 undead, a ghost of a powerful wizard, the skeleton warrior of like an incredible true warrior, and a mummy of a like high priestess. And there's a lot of intricacy that goes into like, why are they undead, but they aren't evil? Like, there's a lot of things that go into it, and the way that it kind of plays with this idea of and the overall story of like duty and ideals and like the realities that you face when your realities and ideals kind of clash with the actuality of living in life. And it takes a very mature tone in talking about some very good concepts. And it has a lot of like fun play from classic European fantasy, done in a very fun and cool way. It's my favorite thing is somebody once wrote that they're like, I feel like it's a D&D campaign where only one of the characters was actually like spec'd for combat, and the other 2 was just like, I'm a bard, but I only play songs. Another one's like, I'm just a merchant. And it's like, okay, well, so these 2 people have to be like the actual this. Well, I'm just like an archer hunter guy. Okay, cool. And what are you? I'm a wizard paladin multi-class, and I spec'd into this, and this is my backstory. And it's like one person came incredibly prepared for a D&D session, and the other 3 not so much. It's kind of how it's set up. After like the first couple episodes.
So that analog, I feel like I just saw somebody who I feel like the reels of his that I see tend to just strike me as he's just reading and reacting to like stuff in like Reddit /D&D or something. But it was basically like, character pitch for D&D campaign. A necromancer casts, Raise Dead, and then is immediately killed, but like one of the skeletons survives the battle and just decides adventuring seems fun and goes off and becomes an adventurer. And so you talking about the 3 undead ghost characters around them strikes me as like
they're
one of them.
Yeah, they're actually protecting the like super evil seal. They're the ones that killed the demons that were going to sacrifice him as a baby. And it's basically he's like raised by these 3 undead, and he like lives with them as a family. And it's like
3 undeads and a baby. Got it.
Yeah, 3 undeads and a baby. It's really impactful. It's very beautiful. It makes me cry. And the rest of it really doesn't. It's not a high octane. It's a lot of thoughtfulness is put into the story. The anime adaptation, I think, in the first season does a lot to capture that. In the second season,
I was gonna say this, and this is one of your honorable mentions on.
This is an honorable mention. Front. So if I was talking about season 1, it'd be on my list.
I'm just looking ahead to like we're going to have 10 kind of back and forth things where you have like a whole bunch to say on a thing, and I have no idea what you're talking
That's
about.
That's fair. I don't have this for too many things. This is just one of those that I'm going to be.
Sure.
Season 2 is a massive letdown for me. Don't know if it's budget. Don't know if it's direction. It just does a really bad job of conveying a lot of those poignant parts. And the action scenes are super lackluster and unimpressive. Especially considering like one of the best of the entire series. It has one of the best fights that I've seen in like anything. When I read it and it's in its manga, it's just a phenomenal epic battle. And it just is not conveyed well in this anime adaptation of it. And it's bad. And it's disappointing because I definitely don't think they're going to get a season 3. I think that this is just definitely a one and done for season 2, which is disappointing because it really gets into the broader scope of the world after this part of the story.
It's just like a one and done for season 2. So a 2 and done.
So a 2 and done. The first season also was like beautifully animated and had like a lot of like watercolor effects to it. Not the case this time around. Very bare bones, like just really like somebody had a contract to fulfill a second season. They fulfilled it. And that's what we got. It's disappointing, but it is what it is.
Gotcha.
So
the next thing I have on my docket, something you can still speak to. I kind of grouped a couple of my entries together here. One of them spawning directly off of the Hbomberguy video. I was like, oh, what other video essays did I like this year? And I want to give a shout out to Blessing at AOU Jr., our friends at Kind of Funny. So Kind of Funny / The Blessing Show. In particular for Blessing's kind of a video Blessing show on black hairstyles and games and stuff like that was a great kind of breakdown that I loved to see. I loved it got the traction it did in the larger conversation of things. And
definitely deserved it. If you haven't watched it, we both highly recommend you watch it. It's a truly phenomenal piece of essay work, but also an important thing to see coming from creators of color speaking about this and talking about it. And, it's not a matter of like people don't know how to do it or the people aren't there or the people don't want it. It's like very much the opposite.
Yeah.
And you really get that told to you in that essay, and it's phenomenal. So.
And yeah, great seeing him kind of talk to the people and the people that are kind of being brought into these spaces and are getting to make those cases and put those hairstyles and just kind of perspectives in general in those games. Great stuff. And then just kind of a broader shout out to Kind of Funny. I certainly don't watch nearly as much as I used to, and I do miss a lot of the day-to-day stuff, but I definitely like check in a lot. I love that now in 2024 they've kind of broken out Kind of Funny from behind the paywall, and it's going to be its own, or the game showcase that they're doing, video game showcase, game show showcase, whatever their like weekly video game kind of feudy mixed with all those other games that Blessing's coming up with. I love that more people are going to get to see that because that's some of their funnest stuff, I think.
I think this last year was also a big year for me coming back to Kind of Funny content a lot. Watching a lot of their live streams, watching a lot of their stuff.
I mean, like a lot of that comes to, I walked away from Twitch a couple of years ago, basically. So I don't really do anything on there. I occasionally hop into, their games reviews or a games cast or something like that. But yeah, like I never really watched the gameplay streams really all that much. I still let's say the thing I probably catch the most regularly would be like in review if they're talking about things that I enjoy. But like, they did a big old run of Saw in review, and I was like, well, I'm not tuning into that for a couple months, I guess. So yeah. But shout out to Kind of Funny nonetheless. Anything to add there on you? Sorry, I cut you off in terms of like you just getting back into it.
Yeah, no, I just got back into it a lot. It's been great seeing them kind of like have this really great moment with their studio space, and really kind of like, you could tell it was a learning curve having that much. It's a very powerful space that they have. It's a very large space. It's very, especially coming from like pandemic at home work to in studio work, and seeing them kind of adapt themselves to it. They've just redone their game lab, which is like their kind of multiplayer gaming section of their office that they've just redone. Really doing a great job, I think, of also providing just great content overall, great daily content that I think is helping them as far as bringing in just, a lot of variety content that they're doing. Mike is really helping push a lot of variety content, but also a lot of like what works for them, I think, statistically, based off of that. But also they also have such a great rounded cast of people now, whether it's Kevin and Barrett on the 1s and 2s. It's Joey coming in every once in a while to give her awesome perspective. Love you, Joey. And then you have like, people who are specifically good at certain types of games, but also just overall are just fun. They also have been having some really unhinged conversations on the Kind of Funny podcast.
Sure.
That are just fun to listen to.
They had the like perfect timing Xcast episode with Phil Spencer, right? Following the Redfall kind of disappointment. And so shout out to like the moment they had around that too.
Mike getting to interview Phil Spencer and talk to him about that in a way that I felt was a little on the softer side, but still a very like asking some very pointed questions still. Really digging deep into that well of like, hey, we know that at any point you're the head of Xbox. You could literally just be like, fuck you guys and walk out. But really like it didn't feel like he was treading his like ground a little bit there, but, or not treading his ground. What is that? What I'm trying to say? Not stepping on toes, I guess is the best way to put it.
Mike. Yeah.
Mike not trying to step on anybody's toes, but still try to get information that people need. Nobody's more disappointed by Redfall than the developers of Redfall, who had a vision and it didn't execute the way that they were hoping it would. Because like, look at, if you want a greater thing to point to show that, look at launch Cyberpunk. This is the studio that did The Witcher 3.
Yep.
They, on paper, they should have been able to knock out Cyberpunk 2077, no problem. Look at what it launched, the state it launched in.
Yeah.
Like is.
Arguably, I would immediately look at that and be like, well, Witcher 3 is a third-person action game, and they suddenly went to a first-person shooter RPG. It seems like, there's probably a learning curve to that. So
for sure,
it was definitely one of those like, I'm not surprised by the issues they faced there,
right?
But yeah,
no, for me, it's more of like when you read like Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, and you learn about like the kind of attitude that both they had about Cyberpunk and BioWare had for Anthem, which is like, we're this legacy studio, we can pull it together, and then it doesn't get pulled together, and like you're just kind of like, fuck. This is the team that gave us Dishonored, and then we got Redfall, and it's kind of like, well, fuck.
Yep.
So like I have a massive amount of respect for Mike. One, getting like not being from a journalist background at all and taking a big swing at that. And I think, doing very admirable at the worst parts of that interview. Yeah. And very respectable at the best parts. Just as somebody who used to do journalism, like actual journalism, there's an art to it, and it's difficult to kind of grapple that when you don't have that experience and that education.
Yep. So hit me with your next anime thing.
My next anime mention is Blue-Eyed Samurai from Netflix. I won't spend too much time talking about this. I think that it does a lot of animation style similar to what you see with What If. But overall, I just think that it's pretty solid. It's a really good kind of like Japanese samurai story done with like some unique twists in regards to like kind of like Japan's, historical Japan's very complicated relationship during the eras of isolation that they had when they isolated themselves from the world. There's a lot of politics and stuff that is in the show that is kind of talking about stuff that normally doesn't get talked about in Japanese history. Granted, it's fiction, but it does kind of take on a unique, it brings up kind of like the unique and complicated history you know, Meiji and like historical Japan has when it was isolated from the world and like imposing their own self-isolation for, you know, a good 100+ years. So
Cool. Yeah, I have no additional knowledge or thing to add
cool.
to that. So, but I'm glad you enjoyed that one. My next one is one of those kind of evergreen ones I feel like I talk about in this type of episode every year. But this year, especially with like all the strikes and stuff, made me absolutely realize how much I appreciate these when they were gone. And that is the trio of Stephen Colbert, Seth Meyers, and John Oliver. They are
Yeah, you're a real big late night buff.
late night YouTube. Like I don't watch any of the stuff live, but like nightly before I'm going to bed, I'm watching Closer Look from Seth Meyers, or I'm watching Stephen Colbert's monologue. When it's on the day after, I always watch the John Oliver segments and stuff. And yeah, so during the summer months when the writers were striking, it was sad that we didn't get those. And like even Seth Meyers also has like his weekly corrections, and I loved in the corrections right before the strike, he talked about like just how much he loves being a writer and how much he loves writing with his staff and his team. And he and Colbert both kind of spoke to like to prepare their audience. Hey, we might not be back on Monday. And they both kind of spoke in the terms of like, we think what the writers are asking for is absolutely fair, and we hope that like the studios kind of recognize that and see that and give them what they want. And so yeah, it was just it was then a sad few months where they were all off. But when they came back immediately, I was like, okay, yep, just like the first Closer Look back ends up being like a 30-minute Closer Look compared to the normal like 7 to 10 minutes, 7-11 minutes kind of thing. But it was like playing catch up for everything that happened over the summer kind of thing. So yeah, another kind of year of just kind of enjoying those guys. I mean, like it very much is. My college was very much like the voice, like Jon Stewart and Colbert helped inform a lot of like my political ideology and views and the way I look at politics in the world, and that has continued on in the form of Colbert, who very much brought his viewpoint of politics into late night in the way that, like, you know, late night could have just easily been talking about the celebrities of the day, like the Daily Show was when Craig Kilborn was doing it, but them taking their political view and bringing that in, just I think, and with Seth Meyers, he continues to do kind of what he did at the Weekend Update desk. But yeah, just enjoy all the stuff they do. And then obviously John Oliver does it all long form style. So shout outs to that trio of regular weekly or daily when they're on videos that I just pop in and throw on as I'm, you know, unwinding with video games in the evening or something like that. So cool. What's next on your list?
Next on my list is going to be Demon Slayer Season 3. This is my number 10 anime of the year.
Oh, so Blue Eye Samurai was just another honorable mention?
Yep, just another honorable mention.
Cool.
Sorry about that. Should have clarified.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, it's my number 10 is Demon Slayer Season 3. I knew this was going to be a weaker season coming into it. A lot of people kind of were like shocked by it, but as somebody who read the manga, I know that this is a weaker part of this overall story. A lot of super important stuff is introduced to it. That is important for context in the next and final part of the story. Like this is a very important section to kind of set that up, but there's a lot of setup in this section. And a lot of people were not expecting that. It does have some very cool moments in it, but overall it is a weaker season compared to like season 1 and 2. But you know, I was expecting that. Overall, like I think that you still have like some really great characters being introduced. The pacing is, people are like, the pacing's way off. It's like, yeah, it is. Like I will say for once, nobody's complaints or critiques about this show are like not legitimate. Like everything people are saying is true. It's like, yes, it's not fallen off though. This is just a very weak point in the series that a lot of people like talk about still to this day. Like, yeah, this is the weakest part of of the manga. Some fun and great characters are introduced or reintroduced, and you have some really cool action moments, but the kind of connective tissue just isn't there like it is for the other seasons. So overall, though, still great.
Okay.
This is also a year of like great banger anime too. So
I mean, you have a full-blown top 10 list for it. So
I do. I watched a lot of anime
with
this
a
year.
couple of honorable mentions.
Mhm.
I hear it. I mean, Demon Slayer is largely nothing to me. I recognize a lot more after it blew up and had the movie last year, and the movie, I guess, no, it was probably 22 when the Demon Slayer movie came out, and got like great, response and traction and stuff like that. So things started to become way more like, oh, I recognize that as a Demon Slayer reference or thing. But yeah, I still have nothing to really add at this front. So
Totally cool.
cool. Moving over back to me, shout out I want to give on the movie side of things. I'll lump kind of 3 entries into one here, and I had it as 2 separate entries, but they're all on the same vein. So in the terms of like weekly movie YouTube stuff I watch, I want to give a shout out to Dan Murrell, who I catch his like weekly box office stuff, as well as like his movie reviews, and then sometimes he'll do like streaming stuff and reviews of shows and stuff like that. I followed him from Screen Junkies when he left Screen Junkies, and just have continued to enjoy the stuff he puts out, and shout out to him and Mara, who got married and went on a nice little honeymoon this year.
Good for them.
Yeah, shout out to them. Shout out to also from like the old movie trivia showdown stuff, Emma Fife I saw just got engaged, so shout out to her.
Hey, nice.
But yeah, in the same kind of vein as Dan Murrell, I also weekly catch the the weekly Honest Trailers video is, as well as the Honest Trailer commentary, even if they're things I don't watch or haven't watched or have no intention of watching. Just seeing their perspective, that level of humor typically lines up pretty well with me. And it's even more fascinating sometimes when like they differ. Like neither of them, like they both hated Loki season 2. So it's fascinating seeing like the things that they pick to kind of pick apart at in the Honest Trailer, and then hearing kind of their conversation about it in the Honest Trailer commentaries. Spencer J. Gilbert and Lon Harris are the 2 main voices now behind Honest Trailers.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I catch them on kind of a weekly basis. And then also, this may have been the first year I really started watching this regularly, but I finally got over the like, I hate the thumbnails that you use for pitch meetings, and finally started watching pitch meetings. Because the thumbnails are always like a character from the movie, but with like crazy bulgy eyes and stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, what the hell is that supposed to do? But I finally started watching those, and those tend to be very funny. And he's also started doing, he kind of cut down his schedule to like 1 pitch meeting every other week. But then in the off weeks, he does kind of like a revisit of an old pitch meeting and kind of gives like his little commentary on both the movie and the pitch meeting. So those are fascinating little conversations as well. So shout out to my little YouTube movie YouTube corner of the internet, and that makes regular rotation in my circles there. So Cam, hit me with your next anime thing.
Next anime thing. My next one is Buddy Daddies. Buddy Daddies is I know that look. Buddy Daddies is about 2 assassins who are 2 rather hitmen who end up in the.
You could have given me a multiple choice of 50 options, and I never would have guessed that one being the Buddy Daddies. It's about hitmen.
It's a weird name. It is a weird name for it, but Buddy Daddies is about 2 hitmen who, one is the planner and one's the executor. So one's all about like snooping, developing plans and strategies, and like being the main setup of it. At home, he's like the domestic one who is like keeps things clean, cooks, is very much like in that domestic life when they're not working. The other one is the executor, the one who actually like does a lot of the more athletic end of things, the kind of like crazy kill shot type stuff. big action moments and sequences, wears like a suit, has his hair pulled back, very much like your ideal hitman. But at home is like wears a hoodie and does nothing but binge plays video games. It is a story about these two men who end up becoming the guardian of a girl after they murder her father. It's a wild premise, man. It's a wild premise. Granted, her father at one point does try to use her as like a human shield, and doesn't even know it's his daughter. It's like from like a like side relationship he had years ago. She's a little girl, like 3 or 4 year old, preschool age, and she is just super adorable. And it's basically these two hitmen who, it's a fish out of water story about these two men who very much have like a detached life on purpose, and are dedicated towards their work, all of a sudden having to become fathers to this little girl. And it's their adventure in all the kind of craziness that happens with it. One of my favorite episodes is an episode where they enroll her in a preschool. They find out, one, how difficult it is to get a kid into preschool. And two, about like, hey, social dynamics with little kids can be really weird and complicated. For example, they buy her like designer stuff and everything, and to make her feel confident going into school. And because of like the obvious wealth disparity and gap, nobody knows how to talk to her. Because they expect that she's going to be like snooty or difficult, like all the other kids do. And so they realize, oh, hey, instead of like dressing her up in like Gucci, send her to like in like some like, Walmart stuff, and like, make sure that she's dressing comfortably, casually. And then they find out about like department stores and like buying things in bulk and how much cheaper those things are. And it's a very fun episode of where these two guys are super committed to like help like raising this little girl, and kind of like the fun things that happen into it when they're both introduced as her dads. But like people like the other moms, or like the moms of like the other kids, all have like theories about who these two hot young guys are who have this daughter. And like the theories are like oil magnet or something, because also they can't be like on the application, they're like, what's the parents job? And they can't say hitman, so they have to figure. It's just a lot of like just like comedy stuff,
project management.
Yep, just a lot of fun, awesome, hilarious stuff going on. It's only going to be one season. It's a one and done, but it's absolutely spectacular. It would be higher on my list if there wasn't other things that I think kind of like one upped it as far as like depth and scope go. But I think if you're looking for just like a casual, just fun one season anime, this is it. Like, this is definitely like a great recommendation for more casual anime viewers.
There you go.
Also has a spectacular dub. So
we've got undead parents and hitman parents. I'm sensing a theme, Cameron.
Now that you say that, I'm looking at it, it's like, there's some.
There's a daddy theme going on.
There's parental themes going on for sure.
All right, cool. So the next one on my list is kind of moving from movie YouTube to wrestling YouTube. I want to give some shout outs to the team over at Cultaholic, which tends to be my kind of go-to for like daily wrestling news, or Simon Miller over at What Culture, although I really only watched Simon's ups and downs from the What Culture stuff. But yeah, like I tend to watch the daily news from Cultaholic, like list video stuff from Cultaholic, ups and downs from Simon Miller. I started watching a little bit of Parts Funknown in terms of some of their list stuff. And yeah, they just kind of keep me, while I haven't really watched a wrestling show apart from, some of the big pay-per-views on Peacock or something like that. And speaking of, Royal Rumble's next week. But yeah, they kind of are keeping me in the loop. A shout out to Simon Miller's kind of tag, like, I watch wrestling so you don't have to. It's very much how I kind of experience a lot of the storylines and stuff that are going on these days. Shout out to Simon Miller getting to do stuff with like Impact, now TNA, when they were overseas, and just kind of getting to make his debut on that scale of stuff. Just very cool stuff. So yeah, shout outs to kind of the little side of wrestling YouTube that keep me kind of informed on all that stuff that's going on out there. So yeah, that's my shout out there. Cam, hit me with your next anime thing.
The next one is Heavenly Delusion. This one is a story told in parallel. It's kind of like there's a big mystery behind kind of like
Sorry, Heavenly Delusion or
Delusion.
Delusion. Okay, cool.
Heavenly Delusion. It is a story told in parallels. One seems to be a story about a group of kids in some sort of academy in some hidden away place, like a bunker or something. And the other side of that story, or the other story being told, is about a young man with the ability to destroy these monstrous creatures that started appearing and caused an apocalypse in the world, and the woman who is tasked with being his bodyguard as they kind of search for heaven, which is supposed to be a place where like that has some sort of connection to this boy's abilities. I'm a big fan of the manga. It goes to some really fun and crazy wild places in the manga. The anime is just barely getting into everything. They wrapped the first season of it, but it really has a lot more to go before it kind of like the curtains really get pulled back. Will probably be pulled back a lot more next season, but this time it's a great setup for a very interesting world and storytelling of these two parallel groups of characters that are both in some way searching for heaven, which is a weird, like, kind of like structure to explain to somebody, but it's a very weird, until you see it in action and in practice, it's a bit of a weird thing to like be talking about, because they're two very distinct stories that are being told, and the storylines that the characters are going through are very distinct and different. One is like they're in one place constantly, and there's like a greater mystery about like the staff and the adults and everything. And then the other one is about two people kind of like journeying through Japan in a Japan that's been wrecked by these massive creatures, and with humanity kind of like on the brink, so to speak. So a lot of great like look and like talk about like ideas about what it means to survive in a world like this. So
okay, cool. Next up for me, sticking with the YouTube space a little bit, I gotta throw in a timestamp here. Outside Xbox and outside Xtra. In large part, this just tends to be whatever their like 7 blah 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 of the blah 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 things, whatever their listicles are. But they're just fun little like, oh, I'm gonna hop in and check out what they have to say about this random topic I haven't thought about or something like that. It's another like weekly when it pops up. I typically am watching it the day it goes live, so I just want to give them a little shout out here. And they seem to be another one like poised, since they also have actual play stuff for me to like sit down and watch their actual play, but I've not gotten to Oxventure. But shout out to the fact that they do that as well. So yeah, just wanted to give them a little bit of love here. So I will say that and then throw it right back over to you, Cam, for your next one.
My next one is going to be it's Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. It's my number 7. We already talked about that. So dropping down from that is Hell's Paradise, my number 6. Hell's Paradise is about takes place in Tokugawa era Japan, where essentially a group of criminals who were slated to be for death sentences are sent with their executioners to an island that supposedly has like the secret to eternal life. It is a like survival adventure where there's just some the studio who's animating it did a phenomenal job of conveying the really wild and spectacular island that everybody finds themselves on, with the fauna and flora and creatures of our fauna and flora kind of captures that, but the fauna and flora of this island are magnificent. Have some deep ties to some like Taoist spiritualism as well. And it's a really great action series. It is a really fun story about just not a fun story. It's not fun. It's tragic and brutal and devastating in many, many ways. But it is a interesting and fascinating read that is also compelled by high octane action sequences. So
very cool. Let's see. The next one I have, I'm going to throw to going back to tabletop land, Worlds Beyond Number. In particular, this is another one I'm like super behind on really at this point, but shout out to the children's adventure that they did, the Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One, their kind of main core campaign, but then also shout out to their funny, silly little one-shots, A County Affair and Space Cram. The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One, I've watched like what I think they've deemed like part 1 or chapter 1 of their adventure, which is like the first 14 episodes. For those that don't know, this is Worlds Beyond Number is Brennan Lee Mulligan, Abria Iyengar, Erica Ishii, Lou Wilson, and their producer Taylor. Last name is escaping me, but Taylor, who's their producer / like composer who does like the sound design for every episode. And they kind of kicked off the year with like teasing that they were going to be launching their own thing. And from day one, it has been a delight. Yeah, I have fallen behind in a lot of the actual play stuff here at the end of 2023 as I was cramming in as many games as I could, or in large part like Baldur's Gate 3 kind of like took so much time and focus that I didn't really get to pour a ton into all these other things. But like their children's adventure is like an 8-episode character creation series for these characters, which was a ton of fun. And the way that moments and things that pop up in that children's adventure kind of carry over and kind of evolve or grow into their main campaign. I mean, the other thing, like the first 14 episodes there is them all level 1. Like it took them that long to get to level 2 and start leveling up. And it's just the like excitement of Brennan, of getting to hear Brennan kind of drive a campaign that is not beholden to battle maps or a confined number of episodes. The fact that they can kind of take their time with this adventure and tell this as a multi-year saga is just a ton of fun. And yeah, they were a blast to catch. The County Affair and Space Cram are just like completely wild little one-shot things. Erica Ishii kind of drives a County Affair, which was their first foray into running a game, and they did a great job with it. And then Abria leads Space Cram. And in both of these instances, there is just like a gleeful madness and chaos to Brennan specifically figuring out how to break the game and like take the rules of the game and just be like, all right, I'm going to do that 1 billion times. And so I have 1 billion points that I can pour into this thing. Is just so much fun. And they're all just so it's great having them all kind of like recording these things, doing these things together. And then it's just one of those fun little Patreons I throw $5 a month to, and I'm happy to do for forever, because I love I love that crew of people. I love that they're finding this success as kind of their own thing, despite having been in the space for a while now. And yeah, shout out to Worlds Beyond Number. I know you haven't watched or sorry, listened to, since it's not a watching thing, most of them, but anything to add there, Cam?
I wish there was something to watch with it. I struggle with just a pure audio podcast, just because I get caught up in my own thoughts, and I have a hard time, like once my mind gets on something, it's hard to pull it back from it to focus on anything else. So
yeah, that's definitely a struggle I run into on kind of keeping up with this one. Taylor Moore is the 5th member that I looked up. But yeah, I very much also wish, even if it was like just a video of the podcast kind of thing, like that would help me, especially like since most of the stuff I watch is watching on something on YouTube or on whatnot. And I just never open up like my actual podcast apps. So it was a concentrated, like, I want to go back and finish a couple episodes here to kind of like finish up that part 1. But at the same time, like, they are such great storytellers. And so the 4 of them around the campfire, as they kind of think about it, is just some incredible stuff and wonderful moments. And there's some beauty, or a lot of beauty, in how like methodical and deliberate the story is being portrayed. And this show, I caught up with it basically, I think, while we were watching Burrow's End. And in particular, Abria is playing a character that like she like the wizard in the story, Suvi, is very sometimes deliberately antagonistic to her allies because of like where that character was raised in this world and that character's kind of like perspective on this world. And Abria does that so wonderfully. And it like I love that she is intentionally bringing conflict into the table, and of course she's doing it because she can do it at that table. There's so much trust there's so much love among those players, and that's like one of the things that because I also catch alongside the Worlds Beyond Number is I'll catch the fireside chats, which are basically like their talk back kind of recaps after each episode, which has, because they're doing it in, or because of when they're doing it, they do often have audience feedback in those factored into those questions, which, you know, Adventuring Party doesn't get, since they record those like right after in Dimension 20. And a lot of people like are concerned about like tension at the table kind of thing. And some of it comes from the fact that it's not a video thing. So we don't see the grin that is on Abria and Erica's face as they're like yelling at each other and like loving these moments where they're getting to kind of butt heads and butt ideologies. That's not coming across in audio only form. So a lot of the questions come in of like, how do you manage tension? Do you like decompress afterwards? And everybody's like, we're loving it. We're having a great time with it. And so they've had to like repeatedly kind of reiterate, like, we are the best of friends. We love that, you know, this is all working out, and we love that we're getting to do this. We love that we get to make this with our best friends. And it is sad that, you don't see just the amount of glee that we have in these moments because we're telling these really cool stories.
Well, I think you need a character like that for a story. Like when you only have 3 players, you need somebody who's going to intentionally, as a player, make the choice to lean into conflict. Well, it depends. You could be running a kumbaya game where everybody's going to be having good times and chill vibes the entire time.
And that's another thing that they kind of touch on is like, this kind of experience, not for every table, but like, this is the story we're all excited to tell. It's sad because this, I mean, like they talk about a lot how one of their biggest inspirations for The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One is like Studio Ghibli stuff and isekai stories and stuff like that. And so it is sad that there isn't a visual component that you can really like grasp onto. That said, I saw Brennan did an interview that basically like they were talking, I think it was around the time of the Ravening War or something like that. And basically the question was like, would you ever want to try and do like an animated series a la like Legend of Vox Machina? He's like, the great thing is I have nothing to announce and can't announce anything, but I love that I know the people behind the Legend of Vox Machina, and you know, we can have conversations like that kind of stuff. And I like, cause I would like Critical Role hasn't already announced that they're going to do, or they're working on a Mighty Nine series and stuff. And I would absolutely love like Critical Role to partner with Amazon and be like, hey, we're going to produce a series based on Worlds Beyond Number or based on Crown of Candy or something like that. I would love Critical Role to like partner with Dropout.
Dude, just give us Fantasy High.
Like I mean,
Fantasy High.
That's, I think
done
that's,
as a proper
I think that's
show
the
would
easiest
be so
one
good.
to
God,
like
so
do
good.
as like we're going to do a 4-season Fantasy High thing once they have a, you know, a 4th season or something.
The
like that,
easiest of fruit is the one on the lowest hanging branch. Take it. It leans into itself already. There's so many fan animations out there already. Like, these are classically hilarious characters who fit into a very fun, fantasy-fueled John Hughes world. It's right there. Grab it. Make it. I think the only thing about that is, like, there's some stuff that's, like, above the table. Like, how do you get that across? Like, there's a lot of... And that's probably the biggest trouble is how much over-the-table talk there is that won't make it into, quote-unquote, show proper.
I mean, it's the kind of thing, like with Legend of Vox Machina, they're not going to just take audio and animate it like the fan animations and stuff.
I don't know enough about
it would be an adaptation. Like, it would just be we're going to take bits. We're going to adapt that story into, you know, this animated form kind of thing. Yeah. It's not just like, hey, here's a fun animatic of this great 3 minutes of chaos and audio and stuff like that. So yeah, it probably wouldn't be that, but it is one of those things of like, I don't foresee that happening anytime soon, but it would be really cool if it did. So yeah, shout outs to Worlds Beyond Number and the incredible crew and just all the stuff they're doing. Also shout out to the fact that like they're playing with a lot of like homebrewed stuff, like the witch like is just a completely like custom class they've created, and shout out to them for, you know, uploading the class documents and stuff onto their Patreon if you want to, you know, game test gameplay as a witch in this using this kind of design and whatnot. So
the concept of witch versus something like wizard or sorcerer that they're playing with is so damn good.
Did you look at the document for the yeah because it's like it's a prepared spellcaster, so they've got like, you know, hints of cleric and druid kind of thing, but then they play with these ideas of like curses and the not trinkets but the little knickknacks and stuff that the witch can create that can like hold a spell and stuff like that. Is like, oh, that's really cool. And there's like a lot of really cool ideas. Obviously they have the familiar in the form of the fox, which is just a great like Brennan insert character.
Brennan playing it like a goddamn fox.
Yeah.
And be like, I'm a talking fox, but just because I talk doesn't mean I'm a human. I think like a fox.
Yep.
And it's like, God damn it. Of course.
Yeah. I can speak now, but I don't understand the societal norms that you guys are imposing on one another. So you have to explain that to me. And I challenge you to explain why I should respect you or something like that. What is respect?
Brennan being so obtuse with that character and it's so great. Massive shout out to them. They're so amazing. I just wish there was an easier way for me to absorb the content.
Yeah. All right. Well, throw me your next anime thing.
My next anime is my number 5. I've actually talked to you about this one before, Trevor.
Well, I'm sure you have.
It's Oshi No Ko.
Oshi No Ko?
Yep, Oshi, OSHI space NO space KO.
Okay.
Oshi No Ko is so.
This is not resonating as anything I've written a timestamp for before. So.
Never before have you written a timestamp for it. We were on our way to go see a movie, and I told you about the show that I was watching.
Oh, okay.
And the manga I was reading. Oshi No Ko is based off of the initial premise is one of.
So this is probably when we were heading down to Spider-Verse, and I completely tuned out because I was just in an angry mood because the World Series was also going on that night or something, and we were gonna be fucked getting traffic.
Yes, I think that was the case.
Yeah.
No, that was a different time. No. This one we were going down to Tempe Marketplace for something.
Okay.
To watch something. It was so Oshi No Ko is first I have to explain to you. So years upon years ago, like 2 decades ago.
You don't need to explain the backstory to me.
I do, Trevor, because it's not going to be a long thing. Don't worry. Basically, a couple decades ago.
I don't believe you.
It's not. Before I get into like talking about the anime proper, it's not. A couple decades ago, on a forum in Japan, somebody on a idol forum. So for people who don't know, idols are like groups or individuals who are like singers and performers who are basically a subculture of basically fans of idols are a subculture of like the otaku or nerd subculture over in Japan. On one of their forums, they said, wouldn't it be an interesting thought would be like, what would it be like to be like reborn as you were born as a fan, retain your memories, and then be born again as their child?
Okay, now I remember you talking about this.
Yeah. That's the premise of Oshi No Ko. Essentially a doctor who is a big fan of an idol ends up becoming her doctor and dies due to a mysterious assailant and is reborn as her child. He's also born as a pair of he's one of a set of twins. It is a unique and fascinating story that's told over the lifetime of this reborn person. It kind of takes into account the idea of kind of a realistic implication and look at kind of Japan's entertainment industry and the history of that entertainment industry. and really takes a lance to it. It does a great job of like dissecting and lampooning and spearheading like very conversations that like people should be having about the entertainment industry over in Japan, but aren't. Even some things a few years ago where a professional wrestler was like a star on a reality show, or was part of an ensemble cast on a reality show, that the negative backlash she received caused her to take her own life. There's like like parts of like that part of that sort of thing. So it's also like talking a lot about parasocial relationships, and it really goes into a deep dive throughout different places and genres, not genres, but different sections of Japan's entertainment industry. And it's a really well-written show that's also, it's a really well-written story, and it plays itself off of both very fun, entertaining moments bounced off of melodramatic moments that make it a very compelling story. And it kind of like takes things in a very serious tone as far as like some of the heavier stuff. It doesn't pass over on it. It's very open and honest about like, even though this is a very ugly industry, the reason why people still pursue it is because of the feeling that they get and and like the joy that they have in performing and being out there in front of people, or acting or doing music. It really goes into the depths of like basically like the cravings of an artist to be an artist, and the victimization that they have within the entertainment industries. And it really does a great way of kind of going through that in a very easy to understand way that does a decent combination of exposition, but not too much, as well as strong character development and story progression. It is one of the best animated shows of this year, and it kind of kicks everything off with what is probably like you could call the first 3 episodes being combined into an hour-and-a-half episode. That really took people by surprise because it really takes a turn at its very end that not a lot of people were expecting. It's truly fantastic. I highly recommend it. It was at one point the #1 anime on my anime list, which doesn't mean anything to me, but was enough to really send some folks into a tizzy, because people were like, because somehow people were like, this makes the ranking, this is like the official rankings of anime, but it's not, because who gives a shit. But yeah, overall, it's a really good story. They wrapped their first season. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it to folks out there who are have any interest at all in just like seeing a story of this, like within kind of like the setting that it's in, but also who are out there for a good time of some melodrama, some comedy, as well as some deep introspective looks at what it means to be part of the entertainment industry.
Okay, cool. Then moving back over to my side of things, sticking a little bit with the TTRPG, but also with the YouTube space. I want to give a shout out to SuperGeekMike, as a YouTuber, really the only D&D YouTuber I kind of follow or keep an eye on.
I have no idea who that is.
Exactly, yeah. His big series, and kind of the thing that got me to start watching his stuff, is he's doing kind of every other week. He started with Critical Role episode, like campaign 1, episode 1, and is kind of doing like a retrospective, like what can we learn as DMs and players from Critical Role kind of stuff. And he goes through kind of episode by episode. He's only up to like, he's up to like episode 40 something now. So we're still in like the realm of Critical Role campaign 1 that I've seen. But yeah, like, aside from that, he also does kind of like he had a whole bunch. I think his biggest like episode and breakout video was like lessons learned from Tiberius, or why we talk about Tiberius, or why we, like who Tiberius was in the grand scheme of Critical Role campaign 1. Basically a character and player who have almost been excised from Critical Role's history because he was only around for like the first 20 some odd episodes, before basically there was a schism and he was going through some stuff, and then obviously Critical Role goes to blow up and everything beyond that. A lot of people had questions in like year 1 of Legend of Vox Machina, like oh, we watched this show, I'm gonna go and watch the series. Who's this dragonborn sorcerer character? What's
Oh,
his
does
deal?
he show up in the animated
He's not
series?
in the animated
Oh,
series.
okay.
So people who like watched the show and then went back to watch Critical Role were like, who's this guy in these, first a couple dozen episodes, and what's like, why isn't he in the show and all that stuff. And so yeah, it was like a fascinating kind of like look and examination. But yeah, mostly I keep an eye on kind of like his, like, he watches an episode of Critical Role and kind of does a breakdown of like, here are great moments at the table. Here's great things that Matt does. Here's things that Matt does that I don't necessarily vibe with, but also like I fully recognize. I'm, Monday morning quarterbacking something from 8 years ago. But yeah, it's just kind of like he does interesting and fascinating analysis on that. And then aside from that, he has just a variety of like D&D, videos about like, hey, here's the power fantasy of each, archetype class, or here's he has a series that's basically like, let's create a character by starting with, a random prompt. And he, goes to I think the website is like, who the fuck is my D&D character or something like that.com. And it basically just randomly generates a prompt, and it's like, okay, build a character based on that or something.
Okay.
But he just has a series, of videos like that. He talks, he has no problem getting into the politics of D&D and stuff like that. And here's why we should talk about these kinds of things.
Here's why this one thing in Spelljammers is super racist.
Exactly. That's one of his videos. Yeah. Here's the problem with Spelljammers, as basically like he examines that. And I have no context for that thing, but like he presents the case and explains like, here's the issues. Here's how I think they could, modify it or whatever. So yeah, just a cool D&D YouTuber that I kind of keep an eye out for when his new videos drop. I don't catch a lot of his stuff. Like he does some various like product reviews of like, let me take a look at, Shadow Dark or something like that, and how to build a character in Shadow Dark. I'm like, I don't know anything about that, so I don't particularly care about that. But yeah, especially his like Critical Role Demystified is the name of the series. That I catch, and just kind of enjoy the work that he does there. So shout out to SuperGeekMike.
There you go.
Yeah. And also like he, just lastly on him, he's been doing it for a couple years. He got laid off like the beginning of last year. So most of last year he had a lot of time to focus on videos, and kind of that became like his main thing. Cause he has like a Patreon and everything. But he posted kind of here's my plans for the channel in 2024. And it was basically like, I got a job, so yay for that. And also I'm expecting a kid in May, so yay for that too. But these things are going to drastically change my life and my relationship to what I can do, what I can put time towards. So here's what I'm hoping to do in this year. And I was just like, good luck to you, man. I wish you all the best. And I'm still around for the ride, but yeah. So yeah, shout out to SuperGeekMike, Mike Christensen. He's been doing D&D stuff for a good chunk of time out there, but just wanted to give him a little specific shout out as like the D&D YouTuber that I watch that isn't an actual play thing. So yeah, throw it back to you, Cam. Hit me with your next one.
My next one is going to be Castlevania Nocturne from Netflix.
There you go. Okay.
I'm a big fan of the original, the first 3 seasons of Castlevania. I thought it was a spectacular show, a phenomenal adaptation, potentially one of the best video game adaptations of all time. And they're taking of Castlevania 3 and turning it into the first 3 seasons of Castlevania, expounding upon that and setting up these characters. Castlevania Nocturne takes us forward a couple of generations in the Belmont family, bring us to the what was the name of the games? That was like something of blood, Rondo of Blood.
Rondo of Blood.
Yeah, Rondo of Blood, which stars Richter Belmont. So this time, Richter Belmont is a young man in pre-revolutionary France. This is he was a young boy born in America in the colonies and sent back to live in France after the death of his mother, to a Aztec vampire who is in the first episode and is fucking rad as shit. They've really expanded upon like vampirism as a mythos outside of just Dracula, in the way that they kind of introduced that there was more to vampires than Dracula in this version of Castlevania. Then, Dracula was like the kingpin of vampires in the first 2 seasons, and then season 3 is about like the fallout post Dracula. We get in Castlevania Nocturne. We are introduced to very much the future of kind of like vampires and humans and the people who hunt them. But it takes place in a very quiet, quaint village in France that is already kind of becoming a powder keg of the bourgeois and the proletariat in the form of the French Revolution that's starting to kick up. The nobility of Paris are fleeing to the countryside of France out of fear of the populist uprising going on. I believe it's still pre-Bastille Day. We'll see. I have to double check on that, but it is taking place, and basically it is about a new vampire, a very old and powerful vampire who is going to is basically been proclaimed by prophecy as a new savior for the vampire race. There's some like very like apocalyptic style of like some prophecy and stuff going on, but you have also really great implementations of 2 of the characters coming to France after kind of like chasing down a vampire from Haiti. They're Haitian. So we get like a great look at like kind of like the Haitian rebellion against, once again, I think it's doing a great parallel showing kind of old world European aristocracy as like the proper kind of symbolism between them and vampires, as they kind of are in like the Bram Stoker Dracula kind of comparison and analysis. And it leans super into that, and it is a fantastic one. Richter is a little less drunk snarky, and like he's more sober snarky than Trevor Belmont was, but he does a great job of showing his great love for his found family. He is a vampire hunter. He has a whip, but he also is armed with magic because he is descended from the speaker line. But he's currently dealing with the fact that his magic is blocked. Anyway, this big bad vampire bitch is coming to town, and she's bringing her coterie with her, including some very intense vampires. There's some like questions of like the church and everything going on in there, some Templar stuff. It's a powder keg waiting to explode, and it does, and it's phenomenal. I can't wait for the second season. It has one of the best, like last episode, like jaw-dropping, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening moments. With the animation. The animation is gorgeous. It's taken on a different kind of, like, I want to call it a rougher style, but it's just kind of a less of, it feels a little bit more sketch to it. Like the animation lines are thinner, but they're also sharper. And so the action feels very crisp and tight and clean. And it's just extremely good. I'm a massive fan of it. Obviously it's my number 4 anime of the year. I cannot wait for season 2. It was such a blast watching this. I binged it. It is just doing awesome shit, and I freaking love it. It's so good.
Very cool. I looked it up. We talked about this on episode 188 of this podcast. So if you want more of Cam's thoughts on it, feel free to go check that out as well.
I go into a lot more detail, I think, there. So,
well, I added like one entry here to try and like line up with what you have, because you still have 3 more anime things to talk about.
That is correct. And then I'm done.
Cool. So my entry here that I just threw in here as a placeholder, but also it's a thing I want to shout out from this year, is Lego time with my family. And or just like also personal Lego building time. Obviously, I have a whole list of a whole bunch of my favorite Lego sets from the last year. But once again, sitting down over at my folks' house, and usually with my mom, because she's the one that really gets into it with me. But occasionally my dad will pop in, or especially for like the holidays. We had a bunch of kind of the holiday sets from recent years that we kind of pulled out and kind of as a family put together this little holiday village for my mom's kind of decoration and stuff for the holidays. It's just a lovely little time having fun with building Lego stuff on the like just doing stuff here front. Built some more Star Wars dioramas, built some Ahsoka ships. We had like Ahsoka's ship as well as the Ghost. were some fun ones from this year. The Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 ship I have out there. So yeah, shout out to just fun with Lego sets, because that's always a good time and a nice like decompressing, relaxing time for me to just kind of sit and I'm gonna do a thing. So yeah.
I almost puked just now. Not because of that. That's beautiful and wonderful. I didn't mean to phrase it that way. I almost puked because I was looking at my Audacity, and it looked like for a second from the preview that it had stopped.
Cool.
And I'm like, when did it stop? I kind of freaked out a little bit.
It
so
didn't though, right?
No,
we're
still,
nearing 3 hours.
Yeah. It's still recording. We're good.
Okay. Well, on that note, go ahead and hit me with your what I've got here. Placeholder Cam Anime 3.
Yeah, my top 3 anime of the year. Number 3 is maybe a surprise from how much I have hyped it up and loved it so much this year. But it is Mobile Suit Gundam: The Witch from Mercury. This is season 2 of The Witch from Mercury. I don't think it's as strong as season 1. I think it has some pacing stuff to it, and I feel like it kind of bounces between knowing like what it needs to end up being and what it is when the season starts, and it kind of pitter patters its way there. The first season of Witch from Mercury is so great from beginning to end. It just is perfectly paced. Season 2 just is not, and it suffers because of that. I think it's a weaker season overall, and misses some really like obvious opportunities storytelling wise to kind of focus up on characters that they had really hyped up in the first season and then just never capitalized it on in the second season. Missing a lot of opportunities with that, and just kind of like introducing plot points that ended up not mattering whatsoever at all for anything. It was frustrating, sometimes week to week. But overall it was still a like smashing great time. Animation was beautiful. A true, like, it struggled to get where it got, but I'm happy where it ended. Even though there's still some things that obviously could have been tied into it from earlier in the season. They just don't get done well. It makes its landing a bit rougher than I would have liked, but it makes it there. Number 2 is...
Oh, I'm sorry. I do still have 2 more entries.
Oh, you do? Wonderful.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. I had 2 more to go, and I added in Lego Time with the Family.
So we can bounce it out.
To bounce back and forth, yeah. So yeah, my penultimate entry here is D&D time in Tayrule, the campaign setting that Cameron has created for me and his brother-in-law John to go around and do adventures in. We've been played the better part of the year. I don't remember when our first session was.
We started, I think, in March.
Was it March?
March or April is what I'm remembering.
But yeah, it's been nice, every other week for the most part. We've had some times where we've had to kind of like skip a session, or a couple times where we've like doubled up and done like back to back kind of stuff.
We're men in our 30s. We have lives.
We have scheduling conflicts. Well, like you guys have I guess I had like one scheduling conflict of, hey, I'm gonna be in Florida for a couple weeks here for work / Disney World.
Yep.
But yeah, it's been as my first actual time playing Dungeons and Dragons, apart from like the one character creation session I vaguely remember from when I was in like 5th grade or 4th grade or something like that. It's been a ton of fun at like sitting down, actually going through this kind of week to week, like ending a session and like taking notes on like, here's the things I want to remember to try and do next time we sit down and meet. It's especially fascinating doing it as a 2-person campaign, because obviously that like the majority of stuff I'm watching is like 4 to 6, maybe 7 players. And so obviously a 2-person setting, a 2-person campaign. Also, the book itself is, not really creature ratings are not based on 2 people. So you're doing a wonderful job usually saddling us with an NPC that you kind of use to help us in combat and stuff. Largely, I think after our first, run in combat nearly got us killed, just because of how, like, we were fine doing damage to people, but because of the numbers game, they were easily, a significant threat to us.
It was also a rude awakening moment for me, being like, yes.
Yeah. Or the fun session where you swapped out like a wraith for a wisp or something, whatever.
Yeah,
it was I
messed up in swapping I accidentally swapped stat blocks.
Yeah, like this one character just almost killed John in one hit. And you look and like, oh shit, I gave you guys a critical rating of like 8 or something like that instead of 4. It's like, oh well, that's bad. That's very bad because there's like 4 of those.
It was a wraith instead of a white.
Yeah,
I was supposed to give you guys against whites, which are like critical like creature ratings of like 4.
Yeah,
and then but I accidentally read off and copied notes down from the wraith stat block, which is I think actually was like 8 or 9.
Yeah. So you had to on the fly kind of like readjust and respec the characters. And
Yep.
stuff like that. So it was fun. Fun little learning experiences like that. But it's been a ton of fun. It's been fun seeing you in that role of a DM.
I tried doing voices, man. I'm not a big voice guy.
You have some voices that you are very comfortable with, and then others that are like, okay, that character's kind of like just become Cam's voice now. But it's a lot of fun.
I got dwarves down. I got dwarves down so well.
There you go. Yeah.
I got Swedish dwarves. I've got Scottish dwarves. I've got dwarves in spades.
Sure.
It's it's like some of the other ones that are tougher.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's been a ton of fun to sit down and play. Even in just kind of figuring out like, okay, who am I going to play? What's John going to play? And like, I mean, it was very much like session 0. Well, we're going to be a party of 2. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and be a healer, I guess. Because we'll probably need that. So yeah, playing as a cleric has been especially fun in your setting because gods don't exist in this island, or like people don't
this
know.
Continent, yeah.
This continent don't have like the concept of gods and religion, I guess. So me playing a cleric of Bahamut, everywhere we show up, I'm like a warlock. That's the closest comparison I can give you guys, because you don't understand what this other stuff means.
Well, we had a really great deep dive with some of the other characters in this last session, where you kind of like were able to finally spell it out for them, and they were like, "Oh, that's interesting," because like, okay,
yeah.
And I gave you some hints about certain other characters.
We're reaching a point where like the backstory that we kind of like made up on the spot in session 0 is now starting to like feed into plot arc and stuff. Like my long lost sister has shown up and is probably going to be a big bad guy or something that we're gonna have to face off against. So yeah, I'm having a ton of fun within the setting of this campaign, and it's just a delight to sit down and do. Very much makes me want to like do more of this, but obviously time is a pain point, and also coordinating and figuring out like sitting down with other people and trying to figure that out. It's one of those things like I would very much love to put out on like Twitter of like, hey, if you're looking to start a game, let me know, I'm interested in playing or something. But also I realized that I'm on, more or less the West Coast, and a lot of our friends that play are on the East Coast. And so that's going to be a whole pain point in coordination. And yeah.
Yeah. It's also a matter of like, it was way easier when I was in my early 20s and we were all in college or whatnot or working. And it was just like the summer of D&D that I had, where it was just all of us piling into my, ended up being a roommate of mine, but piling into his parents' basement and just like basically living out of it for like 3 months. Just doing a bunch of D&D was like a highlight, but it only worked that way because of like where we were at in our lives. Every time after that, it's been like a hit or miss, or like the only other way was that I lived with like shout out to former Naughty Gamer / KGN co-host Chandler Duggar. Working with Chandler, or living with Chandler and our other roommate Nate, we were able to play a bunch of like D&D and other tabletop games because we lived together. And we were all, in our early 20s and didn't have like responsibilities or, careers to worry about and things like that. So,
in this vein, I guess also honorary shout out. I won't go into details on one of them because we did sign like NDAs, I guess. but shout out to playing other games in the tabletop space with John, in particular.
Oh yeah,
like the birthday thing with John.
We can't talk about the game because we signed an NDA.
Yeah, no. Was that the birthday one? I'm thinking of the Firefly game, which we did not sign an NDA.
Yeah, no, that's not NDA. The other one I'm thinking of is the one we did the NDA for.
The NDA'd one I'm not going to talk about. And that was fun too. That was a fun little like, oh, this is an interesting new approach or other mechanic kind of thing. But yeah, also, I just had a ton of fun playing the Firefly game, and whatever the the mafia type game was, or the werewolf type game that we played. That was a fun one too. So yeah, shout outs to, getting invited to game nights and stuff. And also shout out to Bang that we played a ton when Logan and Brandon were out here. And like we just got addicted to that game for a little while, right? Bang's the name of it. Yeah.
You guys got addicted to it.
I got addicted to it.
Yeah.
You were over it.
I was over it a decade ago.
All right.
Like it's not, but that's because I played a metric shit ton of it in my 20s.
Yeah.
With like that same group of people, we play Bang all the fucking time. So.
And I'm not just shouting out a lot of those things because I won a lot of them, but that also helped. Me winning a lot of those things was a cool vibe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, shout outs to D&D and just game time, just IRL game stuff. It was a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun doing IRL game stuff.
Yeah.
My number 2 anime of the year is Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2. Jujutsu Kaisen, this was the arc that a lot of manga readers were waiting for to get animated. People had all sorts of opinions about Jujutsu Kaisen in Season 1, and just nobody was prepared for the heartbreak that they were going to encounter, and it was amazing to watch people just like... That's like... I know there's a really dark part of myself that's something of a masochist, when I love to watch like the reactions of people to really like heartbreaking tragic scenes in anime. There's something about like seeing somebody else also viscerally like experience that pain that like entertains me on some level. But yeah, shout out to just this season being an absolute roller coaster of emotions and action. Of course, this also brings up like kind of a Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 brought up a lot of questions in the anime industry about sustainability. Notably about how one of what was formerly a very prolific studio known for work-life balance and other things like that, with this season of Jujutsu Kaisen kind of being like a breaking point for a lot of them as they felt overworked and stressed, and bringing up kind of like anime labor, like anime development labor, kind of like being brought up and put into the forefront and focus this year as a director of like an episode basically went on Twitter and just talked about like how this like directing this episode and getting it produced and made almost broke him and made him decide to quit working in anime. Like it was just a very stressful, brutal process to get it done. And it's like the art is there and the artwork is like superb and the animation's incredible. And like it works and it plays, but it now comes to the question, like, is this worth the human cost? Right.
I think that conversation was happening around a lot of stuff. Obviously, there's a big conversation around that around the Spider-Verse as well.
Yep, absolutely.
It's disappointing to hear that. I mean, like it's a thing I feel like we're maybe more in tune with because we've been hearing about crunch in video games for so long.
Absolutely.
That said, like I always chide you for crunch IRL, and that hasn't stopped anything. So. So yeah, I think
as I literally did some work this afternoon.
Yeah, I think a lot of the labor conversations that were happening because there were such like major strikes going on this year. I think a lot of those conversations were like people. I think we're seeing people more open to having those conversations and voicing those pains and frustrations. And I'm very much hopeful that animation studios can unionize and get better deals and whatnot, akin to any other creative industry that's out there. Cause it's very, I think in particular on creative industries, it's very easy and it's very easy to exploit passion for
absolutely.
And say, well, like, of course you want to make this happen, right? Everybody wants this everybody loves the thing we're doing. So we all want to make it the best versus like, you're not going to see an accountant be like, yeah, I'm super passionate about this spreadsheet. So I want it. So I'm going to spend 70 hours making this spreadsheet the best it can be. I think that there's an easy exploitability factor to it's something, we see in the game space. We see in games writing and stuff. It's the breaking point I always point back to is like, when I realized how little I would make if I got a job for IGN is what made me stop wanting to work for IGN. How little I would make combined with how they would require I live at the time in San Francisco. Obviously now post-pandemic, they're a little more open to remote work stuff, but still I would be making less than I've made in the last decade of my life if I tried to get like an editing job at a, you know, at the best, biggest site in the world kind of thing for that. It's like, that's not something that like a dream job should also include a dream salary or a livable salary. And it doesn't. So
it's sad to say that a livable salary is something of a dream salary for a lot of folks these days too.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope that creatives kind of across the spectrum and across different industries can find a better balance in that kind of stuff.
I also think it comes down to that there's too much anime being made. There's definitely like an issue with there's just an issue with like resources and like the money being put into anime not like finding its way back out on the other end of things. Chainsaw Man, which was like a absolute darling that people loved and adored, notoriously like lost a lot of money for the studio that and like the people who were funding that project. Like they did not get a strong return. As like or as strong of a return as they were needing to like really make that project work. And so kind of like coming from that also, we have like so many series are being produced and some of them are being produced for like very little like cost as far as labor goes. And it kind of is showing. Mappa's one where it's like, the question isn't really like pay or anything, but it really is just like, there's so much work to do on such a small timetable that they're working off of. At least that's my understanding of it. I could also be wrong. I know that this pay in animation isn't stellar to begin with. So to say like they were being paid like even industry rates is still really low.
Yeah.
This anime in particular, like it was getting a lot of praise for one, its story content and the way that it was, people were enjoying it over the year, but also brought to the forefront a lot of problems in the animation industry, so to speak. Kind of tying back into my conversation about Oshi No Ko. They don't go into anime in the anime industry in Oshi No Ko, but it's in the same kind of vein of like, these are passion things and people are there to take advantage of that and they will do so. And so it's so, you know, you said it yourself, I have a problem with that and I have a job that I don't necessarily love. But I'm still burning this like so much effort and energy to try to make sure that I can make things happen. But yeah, like I told you also, like I had a project to work that I've scoped back twice and it's still going to be a problem. So
work-life balance, everybody.
Yep. It's super important.
Aim for it. All right. Well, my last entry here, speaking of work-life balance, is that nerdy site. The getting to do the podcasts in, you know, what arguably was or at times certainly was a trying year kind of stuff. And there were definitely times over the year I was like, maybe I'm ready to be done with that nerdy site. But the fact, like looking back on the year, the fact that I didn't have to do any solo That D Plus shows was great. I have a doc out here somewhere that basically has like a breakdown of all of my Let's Plays, and it was like I did I had over the course of 2023 we had 116 Let's Plays. That's my final 4 Let's Plays of Skyrim. That's 20 episodes of Elden Ring, one solo, my kind of like intro to Elden Ring solo, and then 19 co-op ones with you. My replay of Breath of the Wild was 15 episodes. My Tears of the Kingdom was 19 episodes. Baldur's Gate 3 was 37 episodes, and your Jedi Fallen Order series was a 21 episode run. So we definitely leaned into, and there are a handful of additional Let's Plays on top of that I didn't even factor in, because those are just all the like long form series that we did this year, and we really leaned into kind of doing that.
Which is funny because we're at a point where like YouTube is like rewarding short form content.
Sure. I mean, like YouTube's never going to, like, I gave up on doing this trying to hit the YouTube algorithm a long time ago. That's not what, I mean, we've had back-to-back 3+ hour best of podcasts.
Yep.
At a third one in today. So yeah, I fully recognize we're lucky if we get 10 hits on YouTube on a video, and most of the, like, we're lucky if one of them lasts the entire episode. So thank you to whoever that person is. But yeah, it's like this is just this is the hobby for me. This is when I, talk about work of like, hey, what am I going to do this weekend? Oh, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to play some video games, going to watch a movie, going to podcast with my friend Cameron. And that's pretty much the nice little gist of what the year was. And the fact that like having you here and both of us under the same roof means like, okay, Sunday night comes, let's sit down and record, talk about, the handful of things we can talk about for the week, or and this is something I certainly was much more like open to and happy to do this year of like, I don't have anything to talk about, so we're just going to take this week off.
That's really, we had a couple of those.
Yeah, no, like, I can talk about Baldur's Gate again for the umpteenth time, but I have nothing to add on that front. I had some times where it was like you were stressed with work or something like that, so I was like, okay, we'll just kind of skip this week, no big deal.
Or I literally would come home at like 7 or like 7 to 7:30 and just like veg for a couple hours and just like, so I wouldn't play anything or do anything.
Yeah. So yeah, this was a nice once again, as we've now entered year 4 of that nerdy site. They're definitely like pie in the sky dreams of stuff that I would like I would have loved to have started doing a Lego show or something like that,
or an actual play show.
Yeah, like Lego actual play. We've talked about like sitting down and doing a lot of like co-op let's plays and stuff like that.
Just didn't happen.
And just like, logistics, doing this as a hobby, after our long week of work, sometimes it is like, hey, I just kind of want to sit down and play a thing, even if it's a thing I'm not really going to talk about for content. I just kind of want to have evenings to myself or do stuff on myself. So the legwork and just kind of setup and stuff that goes into some of those other things just also can be very time consuming and not necessarily finding a format or whatever that really vibes for me in terms of like Lego stuff. So Lego has largely been like occasionally I'll throw something up on Instagram. And that's like, I'm fine with that. The idea that I had years ago of that brick builder show or something like that, may never actually come to fruition, but still I get to still have fun with it. And that like, so that is again, like shout out to the time I spent building Lego, because it was a thing I was doing for myself that wasn't really with the intent of like, oh, I'm going to turn this into a podcast or something like that. So
turning what, like, I think that's the thing. So we've always thought about turning our passions into projects. And sometimes I think it's just okay for projects to stay, or for passions to stay passions.
Yeah. That's just a kind of like peek behind the curtain thing on the Let's Play front. Like, especially for a long time, prior to my promotion and now me working Monday through Friday, the fact that I worked Tuesday through Saturday meant Mondays were a prime day for me to sit down and record a bunch of Let's Plays while you were out of the house and at your office kind of thing. And now that like we're both here, or we're both working the same schedule of a Monday through Friday 9 to 5, like, yeah, I might be able to record something when you stay late at work, or I can like ping you and be like, hey, I want to sit down and record something, but that is like taking the office away from you, and I don't necessarily want to do that. So
it's also like I got to make sure I turn down the TV if I'm out there watching something.
Sure,
got to make sure that we're not worrying about that. I think another thing too is just also like we really put out, like you especially put out a lot of Let's Plays, and we're kind of like rethinking like what kind of things we want to even do for Let's Plays.
Yeah, I mean that is another thing. Is like I'm also, this was like 3 years of a Let's Play pretty much every day, Tuesday and Thursday, and I'm kind of like, a couple years there it was okay, there are plenty of things I can do where I can just kind of do like a one-off, or I would bust out the NES Classic and just do an episode of that, and I still could do that certainly for the SNES, and I've got like a Sega Classic and a PlayStation Classic. Like I've got plenty of like retro things I could sit down and do those kinds of like, oh, here's a limited run series that I'm going to do for that stuff. But a lot of the other stuff, it is just like, okay, yeah, that's just not how I'm playing games these days, really. So sitting down and just going through the PlayStation Plus catalog or going through Game Pass games and being like, well, yeah, I'm going to check this out no real intent of ever putting a ton of time into it. It's like, I don't really feel like downloading a thing just to play it for 20 minutes, upload a video for it, and then, move on to the next thing. So I'm very much in a, like, Let's Plays are on hiatus, but Let's Plays might not come back. I'm not really like clamoring to do them. So
if they come back, I just don't think they're going to have the same kind of like setup and format that we've had before.
Yeah.
Like it's not what either of us are at.
Yeah. Or it's the kind of thing of like, it would like, I'm very much like, maybe I'll do Final Fantasy Rebirth as a Let's Play, but then there are so many things like, I like enjoying things for myself. I like
absolutely
the fact like Baldur's Gate was like, okay, I did that. And for the Baldur's Gate Let's Play, there are a couple episodes where it's like, okay, yeah, in between episodes, I did some of these side quests, but there was also the fact that I played Baldur's Gate 3 other times during the run of that Let's Play. So I was like, one of my Let's Plays was effectively almost the same build as the Let's Play one. So that was basically like my trial run was that playthrough. And then when I finished that one, I was like, okay, now I know what I can do or what I'm going to do in the Let's Play episodes. And I could kind of veer like a lot, especially the back half of that series ends up being like, here's how, I'm going to do these missions today because I know how those missions can play out. And I know I might do a different selection in those missions, but like, I know what the missions are. I know where to go to get them. I know what to do to finish them and stuff like that. So there was like a weird, like, I'm coming from this from an informed place. And occasionally I'll be like, and in my other Let's Play, in my other playthrough, I did this route or something like that. I could kind of talk to it a little bit in that regard. But like, Tears of the Kingdom, I couldn't do that necessarily. And Tears of the Kingdom was very much like, okay, I'm doing mainline stuff for Tears of the Kingdom, but I'm playing a ton, just kind of like doing the shrines and stuff off camera where I don't feel like I need to be on for an audience or something like that. So, and ultimately, I think a lot of it comes down to, I've never been and probably will never be the reacts guy. Like we've done a handful of like, oh, let's watch this conference or something and record our reactions, and they just never end up being anything interesting, so we never end up uploading them because I'm not the guy that's gonna be like, oh my god, whoa, they did that. I'm gonna be like, oh, that's cool, nice. I'm excited. I'm very excited for, oh, there's Vincent, yes, great.
It really is for it's something like I also struggle with Let's Plays of like narrating what I'm doing and talking about it and having like a fun, quippy conversation while I'm doing this thing. It's a skill set that not everybody naturally has, and not like, especially when it comes to React content, if you're not a big, eyes wide open, crazy React person, you're not gonna be.
Yeah,
it comes off facetious and it comes off fake, and nobody likes that.
Yeah, I joked the other day on Twitter about I think you saw it, like back in college, I took classes in like performance art, and like I studied a whole bunch of like performance art eras and stuff like that. And I very much thought to myself the other day of like, if I still did performance art, like my performance art final for the class on performance art was I did a fake walking tour of ASU. And I took my class and we walked around ASU just like the walking tours of ASU do. And I had note cards and I just kind of did like a presentation as if this was my first time doing this, but it was going through like seedy, shitty facts of ASU or something like that of like, and over there you can see the engineering school where we've pushed all the minorities. I mean, and like, I just kind of did that shit. So like my performance art now in that vein would be like, I'm going to record a Let's Play as if it is just like the highlights of a Twitch stream that never happened. Like it would be and like interacting with a Twitch chat that doesn't exist and stuff like that. And just being like, yep, you were spot on there, retro dude. Yep, totally. Thanks so much for the feedback. And just kind of like do that and be like, that would be a weird, wild thing to do, but I'm not a performance art person. I don't do theater so much anymore. So I'm never going to, like, that's another thing, especially I'm never going to put the time into polishing that the way I would actually want it to be. But like, these are the weird producer ideas I have of like, oh, that'd be a fun thing to do. See if you could get any kind of traction on that, but so be it. But anyway, that said, like, it's still sitting down, especially on that D Plus show. We did, I think, probably the most like themed
Yeah.
series that we've done of that in terms of hey, yeah, let's do the Indiana Jones movies, let's do the Spider-Man movies, let's do Pirates of the Caribbean, and just kind of and those were the ones I could most reliably get you and Logan on, so we could have like a conversation that wasn't just you and I sitting down and talking about whatever we watched last week. So yeah, it was a lot of fun doing the podcasts and the Let's Plays this year. But Let's Plays are, I think, just logistically probably more hassle than they're worth. Because again, I see like Baldur's Gate did like some of our best numbers in terms of Let's Plays, but even there, it's like, you know, a lot of like 3 or 4 person episodes offset by a few. Oh, this one got 100 eyes on it or something. That's neat. But yeah, like none of this is ever for the views really, because I know that like it for the Let's Plays especially, it's always been like, yeah, this is another thing to just get in the habit of doing this. And if I ever did want to try and like put myself out there as a producer at another place, I have like a library of work to point back to and be like, hey, we didn't get a ton of eyes, so I would happily work with people to like help, figure out the algorithm and stuff like that. But, here's proof I can sit down and do the work.
Yeah, that's definitely what it came down for me with podcasting too, is that I initially started podcasting because it's like, I never saw myself as like the gleaming personality that was going to make a big breakout and like become this big podcasting star, having my own show or anything. It was always just going to be I need to learn how to edit. I need to learn how to get an ear for audio, an eye for video. Like there's a lot of things you have to do to develop those skill sets. And the easiest way to develop those skill sets is to just do them and edit things yourself. But there became a point where it's like, okay, well, I don't want to do that anymore. That's not really my goal. So
yeah, I mean,
so now I just do it for the love of the game.
Even, I mean, the biggest breaking point I probably had was like, all right, well, Elon Musk has made TweetDeck a thing where you have to pay for the stupid ass subscription thing. Yeah. So I was like, well, that's how I scheduled all the tweets. So that's gone. So fuck this. I'm ready to be done, everybody. And you found Buffer, which has like worked as a substitute for that. And I can just kind of hop in, write out the tweets, schedule it, and have that good to go. But it is very much like especially while I still I certainly lurk on Twitter far more than you do. Like I'm just not active on a lot of social media. Like I still check it far too much. But it's largely doom scrolling and seeing the same things over and over again. I constantly am getting on Instagram feeds of like, you've seen all the posts that are, from the last few days. So we have nothing new to show you. So we're just going to give you recommendations and show you what the algorithm stuff shows you. And I'm like, okay. So like, yeah, I'm becoming more and more detached on that. And I still definitely hit days where I'm like, I could end all the feeds. I could turn all the stuff off, especially these fucking podcasts this month. I'm paying so much for the goddamn Libsyn for January because of the file sizes of these 3-hour episodes that like we've only had 2 and I'm already paying double our monthly rate because of, and I'm going to have to up it again after this episode now, or for this episode. So we might not do an episode next week is what I'm saying. We might not hit January, a 4th episode in January here. We might kind of let the audio file size cap out and just kind of come back next week on our regular episode sizes.
Maybe give us also a bit of a break too.
Sure.
Because we've been doing these big episodes.
But that also means I've got plenty that I've actually been doing in the last month that I can talk about in a normal episode. Like I've been playing through the Yakuza games and stuff like that.
Yeah, so there's a lot that we could talk about.
Yeah,
in the regular show.
You can talk about Pal World next week. Yeah. But yeah, we might just take next week off just for the sake of my wallet. Because that's the other thing I find. I don't think I ever even mentioned it to you, but one of my things that I did end of the year was close down the official That Nerdy Site like Chase account that I had set up because it didn't make any sense since we haven't been taking in Patreon money for the last few years. It's just been I put money into that account and then use that account to pay down bills and stuff. But the like to keep the account from like drawing monthly fees and stuff, I would have to keep it over a couple $1,000s. I'm like, there's no point in doing that. So
No,
I'm
just close it.
I've just closed it and I'm just paying. I put everything on my own cards now.
I mean, it made sense when we were taking money in on Patreon to have that kind of distinction, but now at this point, you know.
So it was one of my goals to close that account in that week between Christmas and New Year's, basically. So, okay, I don't have to deal with this from a tax perspective going into 2024 taxes. I'll still have to do it for taxes for last year, but I was just like, this is just one extra thing that doesn't need to be happening. And it was amounting to losing $15 a month going into just nonsense chase fees. So I was like, yeah, I'm done with that. So yeah, that's been that nerdy site in review for 2023. My thoughts on that. But overall, a shout out to the stuff we did and just the time that it is like a nice kind of check in with Logan a lot of times and seeing where he's at, but then also just kind of getting to sit down and chat about whatever random stuff I'm hearing you watch anime wise and that I can't discern or make any sense out of. So on that note, hit me with your number one anime of 2023, Cam.
My number one anime of 2023 is Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Frieren Beyond Journey's End is a story about...
This is the one we talked about. That was the like, fantasy campaign, but the adventure is the old adventurers won, and now here's what happened next or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like that idea of like what happens after the big bad end guy gets defeated, what happens after you save the world, and what happens to the people that remain. Because the main character Frieren is an elf. She's lived for over 1,000 years, and for the first time, she's realized her detachment to society is caused her to miss out on relationships with the people she cares about. And it is a story about what she does afterwards. And it is beautifully animated, has incredible action moments when it's action moments, has incredible cozy moments when it has cozy moments, and has deeply traumatic, heartbreaking moments when it has those moments as well. It's about life being the journey. And when one's journey is that long, what kind of life does one lead?
We talked about this back on episode 192, alongside an item that I'm surprised didn't make your cut. Maybe it was overlooked as well. Fall of the House of Usher?
Didn't make my top 10 for shows.
Okay. Well, I'll give it an honorary shout out because from what I saw, it looked cool.
It was really great, actually. I thought about maybe doing, like, I could have put it on there.
You've already bumped something else because you'd forgotten Last of Us, so we don't need we need to go back and like redo your list or anything. But episode 192 is where we talked a lot about Free Ren.
Now I think now I think about it, it's like maybe I should have not put like Sunk on there at all, or even a couple others. But anyway, boo-hoo for me. Free Ren is just such a fantastic anime. I talk a lot about it on that episode 192. You can go check out my thoughts there, but a lot of my feelings about it, especially recently, are super spoiler filled. I love it. It's truly a spectacular story. It's an intelligent and heartfelt story being told over the course of all these people's lives as they are journeying towards, something greater out there. To specify about it would be a massive spoiler for like the first 4 episodes, so I won't. But it's certainly the best anime of the year. I just don't think that there's anything better than it. It's one of the best anything of this year. Obviously, it's a number 1 for me, but I've been reading the manga for several years, and it just continues to just astound me with how each chapter or each episode finds a way to like drill itself into my heart and make me feel something. So
very cool. I'm glad that that has resonated with you so much.
I might have gone more into detail, but we're over 3 hours, and I'm tired.
We're over 3 hours. You talked about it 20 minutes worth on the last episode. So yeah, if you do want more thoughts there, you got that option. That's gonna do it for this episode. Another extra long episode. I went into this with like, I've got shout outs for things, and a lot of these necessarily I wouldn't have needed to talk as much or something like that. But when you were like, I came in with 2 more top 10 lists, I was like, okay, well, I guess that's what we're doing today. So yeah, I was not expecting this to be a 3-hour episode, but here we are. You follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. What do you want to give a shout out to there, Cam, that we haven't already given a shout out to in the last 3.5 hours?
I don't have anything to shout out at this point.
Okay.
We've talked about everything. Go check out the other 2 3+ hour best ofs this year, film and video games. We had fantastic conversations about the things that we loved and were able to talk about. You can expect my list to be finished and out sometime in the next week or 2. It's just been difficult to get around to them this last week. But
I'm kind of in that boat of like, I don't really feel like doing writing right now.
Yeah.
My goal is I'm going to try and get my last couple lists up by the end of the month.
Same.
But considering that a lot of my lists didn't hit until April of last year, and I don't even remember why, I'm like, well, okay. Let's not do that. Maybe it was because there was just so much hell going on at the house at the beginning of the year. That,
it was because we were, last year, beginning of the year was rough.
Yeah. Unshout out to all that bullshit.
Yeah, that was a
plumbing and shit.
Fucking nightmare.
Yes. But yeah, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. The shout out I will give is that D Plus show came back last week. So you can go catch Cam and I talking about the Doctor Who 60th anniversary episodes, as I alluded to earlier in my other shout outs there. You can go find more of our thoughts on that. And then, yeah, like Cam said, this week we'll be talking about What If season 2. So definitely stay tuned for our rundown of that series. And then maybe we'll do Echo after that. Who knows? So yeah, shout outs to all that fun stuff. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us, including all these other write-ups and whatnot. If you liked what you heard, once again, rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends. Thank you very much for listening. Stay nerdy and be good to each other.